First pitch with 2 on and 1 out to Eric Karros, playing in place of the injured Hee Seop Choi. Acevedo deals and Karros hits it deep to left. This ball is gone. 3-1 Chicago, and Clemens will not get number 300 today.
Randall Simon plays behind the runner at first, Lopez, and that is a pop-up. Granzolata. And they are rocking Wrigley Field. The Cubs have gone ahead in this series, 2 games to 1, on a masterpiece from the young Mark Pryor, a 2-hitter against the Braves.
And John, we said coming into this series, they were going to have to beat Mark Pryor and Kerry Wood at least once in order to win this series. And that's not a good proposition right now. I mean, Kerry Wood pitched a fantastic game in Game 1. Now here in Game 3, Mark Pryor pitches a great game.
Pryor on his 133rd pitch of the night gets the pop-up from Fick. And the only run he allowed was a manufactured run. 3-1, the Cubs win. They really didn't score enough runs to ordinarily beat the Atlanta Braves. And Mark Pryor was clearly the difference.
Eternally optimistic. Swing and a miss by Javier Lopez. And now the Cubs are an out away. Experienced something not done since 1908. You've waited 95 years, Chicago. It's time to celebrate. The Chicago Cubs advance to the National League Championship Series. Sarah Wood undoubtedly will celebrate with her husband, who more than likely has to be the MVP of this series, going 2-0, 15 and a third innings, allowed 3 runs, struck out 19 batters.
The Florida Marlins are on their way to Chicago, and so are the Cubs.
2 outs, 9th inning. And the 1-1. Sammy drives one. Get out the tape measure. Long gone. I don't believe it. Sammy Sosa ties the game 8-8.
Well, Pat, we talked about the fact that Sosa hit the ball right on the screws last time up. This time, a no-doubter against Urbina, who, for whatever reason, after throwing a bullet of a fastball by him, he threw him a slider, and Sammy hit it out of sight.
Strange incident at Miller Park. 2 of the sausages in the popular sausage race got hurt tonight when a Pittsburgh Pirates player took a swing at one of them with a bat. Now, this may have been intended as a joke, but now the Milwaukee County Sheriff's Department is investigating. Russ Kirkpatrick is live in the newsroom with this breaking story. Russ?
That's right, Mike, and no one's laughing now. Here's what we've learned. The sausage race took place in the middle of the 7th inning as usual, but there are questions about whether what happened during the race could be considered assault. As the sausages passed the Pittsburgh Pirate dugout, the first baseman, Randall Simon, took a swing at the Italian sausage. Now, the Italian sausage tripped and fell onto another sausage, as you can see there. After a struggle, they both got up and continued to race. We're told that 2 women were treated at the Brewers first aid station, and a spokeswoman for the Milwaukee County Sheriff's Department tells me tonight that Simon, the player who hit the sausage, will be interviewed by deputies.
Chad Fox working on Simon. The stretch and the pitch. Simon drives one in the air to right. Deep. Back goes Cabrera. Near the wall. That ball is gone. Home run, Randall Simon. Cubs lead 4-3. Randall Simon driving one over the wall and right. And the Cubs have the lead once again.
Tying run at second base, the winning one at the plate here in the bottom of the 11th inning with 2 men out. Rounded up the third base line. And the ball dropped by Ramirez, and now they have the runner caught. Castillo and a tag play will end the game. The Cubs have taken Game 3 on a bizarre ending to Game 3.
No score. Cubs have a great chance. Bases loaded, one down. And the 2-2. Swinging a high fly ball, deep left field. Back goes Conine. Conine near the wall, looking up. That ball is a grand slam. It's a grand slam for Aramis Ramirez. Cubs lead 4-0. Right down the left field line. Towering home run. Cubs lead 4-0 in the first.
That's the third home run of the postseason for Ramirez. He's doubled his RBI output. This is not the same Dontrelle Willis. We told you early that his stuff is short.
Now Kerry Wood, a very good hitting pitcher. Went 10 for 61 during the season, hit a couple of home runs. And in Game 1 of the division series, Wood with the big 2-run double off Russ Ortiz.
Great at bat for Woody. Even if he doesn't get a hit, he's up to 43, 44 pitches. As the pitcher up there, you want to make the opposing pitcher throw more pitches.
In the air, left center field, Kerry Wood plays long ball.
Welcome back to another exciting edition of the Pointless Exercise Podcast. It's time to remember this crap with Mike Donahue. Mike, how are you?
Hey, Andy. I'm well. I'm re-energized. It seems we took a little bit of a summer hiatus and then came back with a twist and explore some olden years. And, I found myself subsequent to last week's breakdown of the Cub Hall of Fame, taking a deep dive on the likes of Heine Zimmerman, Hippo Vaughn, and glad to have participated in that and add more useless facts to my repertoire. That was good.
I honestly, why don't? Well, maybe I should sell this T-shirt. But I was thinking, why don't the Cubs sell a Heine Zimmerman shirt? Who wouldn't buy Heine Zimmerman apparel?
So
I bet you the obvious shirt dude will be all over it. I like my Heine or something.
Just to close that paragraph, when we talked about him, we just made fun of his name. We learned that he had won a Triple Crown. Impressive. My deep dive, though, led me to a recent thing I've discovered on Baseball Reference, which I really enjoy is, and I know it's been there a long time, I just hadn't really explored it, was when you go to a player's page at the bottom, they have like this, like a Saber biography. So it's a little bit more of a prosaically rendered narrative, and there's one for just about every player. And so in taking my deep dive into Heine Zimmerman, I learned that he was considered one of the stupidest human beings to play ball in the 19-teens.
So he was the 20th century David Bodie.
Just 100 years apart.
Bodie provided the greatest highlight I think we'll get from the 2021 Cubs. Did you see the footage of him stepping on the ball and falling down and spraining his ankle?
Tremendous.
It was camouflage because there was something painted. There were words painted in white on the ground,
I know.
And the ball was laying.
I saw the snippet where they paused, the camera zoomed in to a low resolution shot where it sort of blends in, and then zoomed back out. El cerviced it onto the ground. Oh my! What the hell happened to you?
It could be a fractured ulna.
Well, I was thinking like Ron Cedeno, but that would still be in the 20. No, it would be the 21st century. Ronnie was.
Ronnie was dumb.
As far as the dumbest players. Yeah.
Roberto Novoa.
Big Spot Bob, Brown Spot Bob.
I always used to joke that the Cubs would be going into extra innings. Like the Cubs are in good shape as long as the tiebreaker tonight isn't a spelling bee.
Yeah, we should just
I shouldn't say that about Robert, that he was dumb, but he certainly looked dumb. And there was a blank. There was nothing going on in that face.
Well, you want to know
a complete blank. The whole
you want to know who might be classically, eternally stupid? It would be the person for whom Navoa was traded for, and that'd be Kyle Farnsworth.
Yes. Well, see, that brings back to one of the proud moments in Discipio history was, thanks to an intrepid reader, we knew why. I don't remember what year this was. Remember when Kyle broke his foot?
I
missed
do.
games, and it turned out that one of our readers had seen him before the game punting a baseball around the outfield, and then he was unavailable that day and went on the disabled list with a broken foot. He broke his foot kicking a baseball like a football in the outfield.
Let us not also forget Mike Harkey's cartwheel, which ended his season.
Yep. Ryan Dempster falling over trying to celebrate a win and climbing over the rail and falling down.
Did he? Unfortunately, I don't think he.
He wasn't. He was not. It was not a lasting injury.
Damn. Okay, so he doesn't belong. There's one area that we can keep him out.
And the best part about it is there is a pretty good picture of it. Him like sprawled out in front of the thing,
Dempster.
and the Cubs are wearing these ridiculous like red hats with the blue. It must have been like. It was some stupid holiday in baseball made them wear these ridiculous hats. They looked like they should have had a propeller on the top.
A beanie?
I was like, oh, God.
All right, worth it.
All right, well, we are back to our normal. We are spinning the wheel tonight.
Random crap time. For anyone following along, we're chronicling 32-year period, and so far we've done 8 teams. We've beaten like a dead horse 8 teams that have been under 500, 5 that have been over 500, and 3 playoff teams. What we have remaining in the 19 season, so we're getting close to the halfway point. We still have 6 teams to go over that finished the season 500 above, 13 teams that were under, which is apt. And amongst those 500 teams, those 6 500 teams are above, there are still 3 playoff teams that we haven't discussed, but still a whole lot of crap.
We have pretty much decimated the 90s.
We really have. It's uncanny.
There's a lot of the 80s left.
89 is the only season we did, and that was not a crap season.
And then there's still a fair amount of the aughts.
Yeah, we've done 2000, 2001, 2005, 2009. So still streets ahead of
the 2
80s.
big ones are still on the board.
Yeah, I know. The epic ones. The ones that will probably be 2 hours long at least.
All right, well, let's fire this up and see what we end up with tonight. Look at that.
We're going to be here a while.
It's time to relive the Dusty Baker and Steve Bartman. 2003 Cubs. I probably shouldn't.
Well, here we go.
All right, so 5 facts about the 2003 Chicago Cubs.
Cubs center fielder Corey Patterson tears his knee as he runs into first base. I'm trying to keep this a little random and maybe avoid some of the more obvious ones. Everyone who's listening knows about 2003. Opening day was in New York, and the aforementioned Corey Patterson had about 9 RBIs. Cubs got off to a good start. 2003 also featured the Sean Estes game.
Oh yeah,
you might recall in September in
Cincinnati,
very much needed. That's right, needed. It was summer of Randall Simon, which I have nothing but fond memories about, and I'm sure we'll explore. And I'll just finish with the most obvious fact that in our lifetimes, this is the point up until that point where the Cubs had come to close that they would come to clinching a National League pennant for the first time since 1945. Just a few outs further with the lead than the 84 Cubs, with whom they have a lot of similarities in some sense that I'd like to get to as well.
Wait a minute. So you're saying that the 2003 Cubs almost went to the World Series? I don't remember that. Oh.
They were astonishingly close. And I would say of all the playoff teams, right, just off the bat, one of the lowest winning playoff teams. They barely got in. This goes to show you how fickle it can be. But yeah, it was a ride.
Yeah, they only won 88 games. Clinched on the second to last day.
Yeah, they won a doubleheader sweep. Was it the Pirates, right?
It was the Pirates.
Not the Brewers.
No, the Brewers were helping out in Houston. Wes Obermueller was busy beating.
That's the name. For some reason, there was an odd name in my head, and I thought, was it Ryan Vogelsong of Pittsburgh or Oberweiss or whoever the hell?
No, not Jim Oberweiss.
The guy is.
No, the guy who runs for every office in Illinois. Doesn't win, but still shows up in the Capitol as though he's going to be sworn in.
He did that this year.
Yeah, Jim, you didn't get elected.
Mr. Smith cannot go to Washington.
Take your milk and go home, weirdo.
Ice cream.
Yeah, that was
Russ Ollendorf.
They were battling the mighty Astros down to the wire, and needed a couple of wins the last weekend from the Brewers of all teams who were terrible. And
they were.
They let them clinch. It was Chip Carey's finest year, probably. Which I think did a great job announcing for the.
Why? Because
Cubs.
We had our volume turned down most of the season. We did have Chip, and I will say that when they clinched, our local hero Dave Otto was actually in the booth. It was a regional broadcast on Fox 32, and the Cubs play-by-play guy was Steve Stone, who had come back after his rare 2-year disappearance, which we had talked about.
Was that his Valley Fever? Did he have Valley Fever one of those years?
Supposedly,
the lung
Valley
fungus.
Fever. Yeah, he retired, I thought. And I had to correct myself on these podcasts. I thought Carter and Otto did the games and cable and Channel 9 in 2001, but it was 01 and 02. It was so Stone's return, but he couldn't have been in the booth because he wasn't contracted with Fox. But somehow Otto was able to, for some reason Otto was there and they picked it up. So good for Dave to call that moment, which also ended on a double play, which is my favorite because it means, although probably not in this instance, but
most exciting double play in Cub history.
Are you testing me with one from recent years?
I would think there's probably
the pennant was clinched on a double
probably
play.
one that was a little more exciting than the.
Yes, and I'm sure people were standing in the ninth inning of both games, but as a longtime grump. I stand with 2 outs in the ninth because that's sort of been the practice for 30 years. But I like to think that they didn't get up yet and the game ended normally. And there it is. You're right, though. It was outdone in 2016.
The double play to win the pennant seemed to catch everybody by surprise, including Joe Buck.
Really?
It almost ended too quick all of a sudden. I mean,
didn't build.
Once Puig hit it, and then you knew it could be a double play. But we're kind of like getting ready for the last 2 batters of the game, especially since Kyle Hendricks had been cruising and then Aroldis came in. And
he got a double play to end the 8th, too. Yeah.
So now we're turning it into a 2016 podcast. But, so that double play was, I'm trying to think off the top of my head, was it
6-4-3.
Jose Hernandez to Mark Grudzelanek to Eric Karros?
I thought it was 4-6-3. I thought of Hernandez in the pivot. I might be wrong though. We have to
I picture Grudzelanek in the middle of that somehow, but maybe I'm completely wrong.
Grudzelanek, obviously.
I don't remember who's pitching. I gotta look this up. I don't remember who the pitcher was.
Probably Joe. Sweaty Joe is my guess. Let's pull it up. And we'll work our way in whatever order we fucking feel like it. Because
I don't think we should even talk about the playoffs. Who wants to talk about that?
No.
Let's talk about it. So one thing I want to say about the 2003 Cubs was that season was so much fun. It was unexpected, and it was fun, and I rarely ever think about it because of the way it ended.
It's true.
I'm still so haunted by it that Matt Clement started the game. Pryor beat the great Josh Fogg in Game 1. And
former White Sox.
Matt Clement pitched Game 2. And guess who was on the mound? Everybody's favorite reliever from 2003, Dave Veers.
Dave Veras actually got to.
Yeah. He was on the mound for the big celebration. That piece of shit.
Wow. So Borowski must have pitched.
Well, it wasn't a save opportunity. It was 7-2. Dusty.
Right.
No, I gotta go with my save, man.
Right.
If we don't need a save.
Foregone conclusion. No. Well, right, and it would actually make sense there.
Ramon Martinez come in and pitch instead. We'll use a shortstop. That'd be fine.
You make a good point, though, and I'm glad we have the opportunity to do this because you're absolutely correct. It was a fun season. It was very much like '84. It was out of the blue somewhat. It really was because '02 was terrible. We don't think we've covered that team yet, but we've covered adjacent teams to it.
Terrible adjacent.
It was right. It was terrible adjacent. I will say that it had probably more than the typical standard optimism that we always have had in time immemorial and for all teams. You always have that little bit of optimism. I had it in '84, even though I had no reason to because they won 9 spring training games and they hadn't proven anything. But I think we had a little bit of it had been done before where they came out of the blue. 84, 89, and 98 were kind of out of the blue. But having Dusty come in, we were all it wasn't like he had to win us. He won us in January. Of that year, the day he got hired, the day he was at the convention.
Well, and so 2002 was a terrible year, except for one thing, and that was we got our first glimpse.
Mark Bellhorn setting records.
Well,
no, sorry,
I was thinking of a different Mark. So we got our first glimpse at Mark Pryor, and realized right away that he was really good, and and then there was still we were all still in the tank for Kerry, and you thought, well, you got those two guys.
Hoping it stay healthy. And Clement was kind of an understated acquisition for the 02 season. 03 was his second year. He came along with Al Fonseca, but I couldn't remember who the Cubs traded for him. But Clement was solid.
You don't remember who the Cubs traded for Matt Clement and Antonio Alfonseca?
Are you going to shame me because I totally should know?
He was the rookie of the year in the National League and pitched against the Cubs in the playoffs. So the Cubs beat him. The D train.
Oh, that's right.
Dontrell Willis.
But he wasn't the feature. He wasn't even supposed to have pitched that season. Well, as early as 03, because that's the year Dontrell came up. Was he the main piece? Was Dontrell I remember being maybe a little bit excited about Dontrell, but he was way down in the system, right?
I don't remember. This is funny. Guess who started Game 2 of that doubleheader against Matt Clement? You have already mentioned him.
But it's not Ryan Vogelsong?
It was Ryan Vogelsong.
Oh, okay.
They had quite a lineup. I don't know how the Cubs beat him twice. They had Tyke Redmond, Abraham Nunez, Rob McCoyak, who a couple years later would hit
we'll talk
8 home
about
runs
him
in a
the
doubleheader.
Memorial Day weekend and the following season, actually, I believe.
Craig Wilson, Carlos Rivera, Jason Bay.
Jason
Jack
Bay.
Wilson. And, wait a minute. Jose Hernandez was a Pirate, not a Cub. So I don't think he started that double play.
Oh, you're right.
In the Aramis trade, right?
Yeah, so it would have been Grudzalong to Gonzalez. There's no way Gonzalez is not in the game for defense at the end, and I don't mean that ironically because he was actually a good glove man.
Right, which is what made the error even more galling because it was like the one you would have picked him as somebody just hit the ball to Gonzalez, and then we saw what happened.
I know, and it's he should have made it, but
yeah, he came. They subbed Gonzalez in the 9th for defense.
He didn't start. I wouldn't. I couldn't tell you offhand without really stopping this in its tracks and thinking about it. Who else would have played shortstop?
Ramon Martinez.
Oh, that's right. So
it was a doubleheader.
So. He was one of those. Ramon Martinez is one of those little dusty guys.
Yes, from
that were not very impressive, but did some good things. Tom Goodwin was another one.
He also did a lot of bad things. Catcher in Game 2 was Gabor Bako, one of my least favorite Cubs of all time.
Regular catcher is Damian Miller.
So, you talked about how Dusty had managed the Giants to the World Series in 2002. Got them
the previous season.
Got them super close to winning the World Series. Famously took Russ Ortiz out late in the game with a big lead.
He himself was 4 or 5 outs, I believe.
Had Russ keep the ball, and then the Angels just went ham. and came back and won the game and then won Game 7. Then blowing Game 6 cost one of my favorite all-time Cubs, Sean Dunston. He would have hit a lead-changing home run in the World Series in his last at-bat ever.
Lead-changing and game-winning? Is that the one that would have held up?
It would have been the eventual game winner, yes. That was the last run the Giants scored.
Sean deserved that.
So maybe not lead-changing.
It was big.
Because they blew a big lead. But anyway, it would have been a big deal, and Dusty fucked that up. And the Giants were so enthralled with Dusty, who had won a lot of games for them, that his contract had expired, and they said, thanks. We're going to hire Felipe Alou, and you can go away. And he famously owed the IRS quite a bit of money. And so when the Cubs showed up with a big sack of cash, he said, oh, okay, and came to manage the Cubs. He had reservations about it because he was very good friends with Don Baylor. And Don had just been canned by the Cubs the year before. But Don basically said, it's not so bad. Go get him.
Take the money. And
Dusty really did bring a completely different attitude to that franchise.
100%.
That first year was fun. I mean, we got tired of Dusty's bullshit after a while. But
I think there's a point where the bloom is off the rose and then it's ugly.
And I'm going to go even when we get to the way it ended. I feel like Dusty. I think that team broke Dusty. The combination of blowing the World Series in spectacular fashion in 2002 and then blowing the pennant in spectacular fashion in 2003, Dusty was never the same. And he's won a lot of games since, but he wasn't the Dusty the Cubs had in 2003. But it was famous for a series, we'll get to this one, the 5 games in 4 days against the
Labor Day,
against the Cardinals. But there was a Cardinal series before that when La Russa was doing some of his typical Tony La Russa shit. And Dusty walked up out of the dugout and got on the top step and just started screaming at Tony. Basically tell him, knock that shit off. We don't put up with that shit anymore. Which every Cub fan loved. We ate that up like it was, because we still hate Tony La Russa. And it was great to have our manager telling him to go fuck himself.
Yeah.
So Dad and I had gone to the Cub convention the year before, and there you go in that winter. And I remember we had the conversation because Dusty was really impressive at the Cub convention. And I remember thinking, if he can't figure this shit out, we're never going to see them win, ever.
Which we learned later is not true, but that's a genuinely real feeling at the time.
Yeah,
I mean, it gets to be burdensome.
I mean, there are, and it's funny. There's a lot of differences, but there's a lot of. If you do a Venn diagram of Joe Madden and Dusty Baker, there is a big meaty middle that is similar. I mean, down to the kind of, everything's cool, and the jazz and drinking wine. I mean, Dusty did cool stuff for reporters. Like he would remember that reporters liked a certain kind of food, and he'd have it ordered in and present it to them before a game. Like, I remember I was at this place and I know you like it. Here, and he would that's kind of Joe. It's kind of Joe-ish. Dusty had a different, and a lot of it. We don't want to get into the sociology of it, but Dusty had a far different upbringing in life and through baseball, obviously, than cool white Joe did. So there was an edge there that Joe can't have. Right.
Joe can't have. But they did sort of exude that sort of, I wouldn't say hippie-ish, but they're really kind of a laid-back, kind of a brotherly type of appeal, I think. And that's easier to pull off when you're new and also when things are going well, obviously. You talk about that convention, and I've told this story before on podcasts and other forms of communication. But when I first came across your writing was in 2003, and I think you can probably attest to this. It happened just coincidentally happened to be the same year that you sort of got a whole wave of new readers, because it just kind of it grew because the Cubs are doing well.
That's because you guys were looking for Cub content, and I clearly was providing the best Cub content that anyone could consume.
I sort of was. I was actually blogging myself at the time. I don't know how. I'm not that technical, but a friend of Oleg's was set him up, and I already had this blog roll of like the Cub reporter and the Cub pundit, and I can't even remember the uncouth sloth, and somehow I had that, and I was on theirs. I'm like, oh, that's nice, and you weren't on any of those, and nobody, and you didn't have anybody on yours, but so you weren't exactly easy to find in the very beginning.
No, I had my way too clever name.
Yes,
it should have been like Cubby.
Right. So I was like 2 months into
Cubbyball.net.
Right. I was like,
I'd be a millionaire.
Right. I was like 2 months into this like Cubs blogosphere, and again, writing things myself, basically hijacking this blog from Oleg that his buddy kind of set him up with every now and then to post my, inarticulate random screeds. But around that time, and this was probably after the season gotten underway, so it was like May or June, and I was in a conversation, I think with one of my brothers, and we're just talking about Sandberg and how his career went south and things that we've talked about rumors surrounding his retirement. And so the question was raised, was there anybody besides Dave Martinez and Rafael Palmeiro? And we're living in the early days of Google, this Google machine, where I'm like, hey, I don't know, the internet's told me a lot of interesting new stuff lately, let me just see. So with the sort of Boolean search of Cindy Sandberg and baseball player, blah blah blah,
Did you go to dogpile.com and type in
I was corn
dress.
The very first hit back then, this was before, a lot of marketing has flooded Google searches. So you'd sort of get sort of unadulterated results. And yours had to be the first one was the reference. And I'm just like, hey, I'm just curious if there's anybody besides those two. And instead I was taken to this thing that kind of looked like a blog that the other people that I was interacting with had, except number one, you used your real first and last name. Nobody did that, right? It was always like, I was Mike D. There was the uncouth sloth. There was Ruse.
Well, how do you know it's really my real
Well, I was more like, who's this ass? Like, actually, I was impressed. But who's this guy?
Pompous prick?
He's using his first name and his last name. I'm supposed to know who this, but I didn't. I was like reading it, and it was sort of, I've always, obviously, we've talked about, and we work together. I've always found your writing very relatable because I think we have similar upbringing, similar age, demographic, Cubs, Bears, Notre Dame. So I was drawn to that. And I remember I turned Oleg on to it. And eventually for a while that summer, you did start appearing in other people's blog rolls, but then you had like the A-list, Kelly, maybe a page for Kelly Dwyer.
Yep. I missed the A-list.
And so, so just like for the inside scoop here just for
the explanation of how Stevie Nicks did cocaine.
That's right. Alone. That's the number one thing I think.
Woo! So. Good God. Her assistant, let's just say, boys and girls, Stevie Nicks' assistant never made enough money. Never.
So, long story short, too late.
I think about this. Don't you think I invented Twitter? So during games, we did Gamecasts, and that basically was just a long Twitter thread. It was just a bunch of assholes.
And that was before like
doing
a lot
kind
of
like it was always like one line, us making fun of, and then of course we had I had a shout box. And
you were young and you did. Yeah. But
I don't remember. I don't think I had the shout box in 03 though.
But you did not. You were putting out shit daily because you probably had the energy and whatever. Like you're just, and the Cubs were interesting, and you probably saw that all of a sudden you had this following, and the Cubs were like pulling this shit off. So it's kind of neat. I mean, you yourself could probably point to how much it's chronicled in writing
or the site. Because I didn't know there wasn't a blog because there weren't blogs.
What the hell's a blog?
But I started the site in the worst possible year of 1997. When they were terrible. Yeah. And then, of course, but then we had the magical 98. So I kind of built up a readership in 98. But then they go back to being terrible in 99. They're terrible in 2000. And then they have,
in 01.
And then 01 we come back. And then 02. And now here it is in 03. Yes, I had, at the time, a lot of readers.
Mm-hmm.
And so
the internet had become so much more accessible.
The whole idea was keep cranking out the content. And even if you have to write stupid shit like Bleacher Nation does every day, because you gotta have 6 posts a day. I did the Daily Dose. I did a long list of links every morning, and I would start the night before and look for stuff. So I'd have it pretty well started.
So you would type in Mariotti puts down the donut the night before.
Well, not stuff like that. There were like some of the more like. I had to leave in the morning. I had to go through the papers and pull like Seabiscuit's jockey and Mariotti with the donut and I don't remember. David Huff wasn't around yet.
Wizard of Oz.
The Wizard of Oz. That's back when Barry and I were on good terms. That went south very fast.
Now you win some.
All because I wrote a column that was completely correct. I did a make your own Barry Rosner column because, and it was stupid shit like talk about how the Cubs shouldn't have fired their former trainer. Here's something from Sanjay H., the greatest general manager who doesn't work in baseball. Remember that guy?
Yeah.
And then Greg Cody wrote something funny in Miami. I'm going to link to that because instead of writing, I'll just link to somebody else's stuff. And you could build a Rosner column by plugging that shit in. And he got all pissed off when he saw it. And I'm like, you shouldn't be that pissed. It's right. Maybe write an actual column once in a while. The only thing, he hadn't written a real column since Ben Christensen hit Anthony Molina in the face with a ball.
Oh, that was like his.
He made a meal out of that forever.
Bob Green, yeah. It was. Yeah.
So the whole idea was I would have some of the links, like the feature story stuff. I would find that I thought was interesting. I'd have those set, and then in the morning I'd go through because I didn't, I had a real job. So in the morning I could go through and plug in like the first 7 or 8 links and write a little something about the game for the night before, and then post that. And then game casts were whenever the Cubs were on.
Yep, which is of course we're all at work.
I threw it was middle of the afternoon most of the time.
Yeah, it was. I think they're still only playing about 22 night games a year in 03. It might have been right around then where it jumped. Maybe not because it was only 15 years in.
I also didn't hurt. I was single at the time, so that didn't hurt. I had a lot of free time.
You were churning them out, and we were following along, and it was quite a ride. I alluded to in the 5 facts that Patterson has a huge opening day, which I think he did that in 02 also in Cincinnati. Like 10 RBIs in successive opening days. But there are some similarities maybe to the 07 Pinella team that we talked about, where they're kind of like Dusty was still sort of detoxifying whatever there was around there. They only won 88 games.
Speaking of detoxifying, one of Jim Hendry's best trades happened in the offseason before.
Yeah,
and that was getting rid of Todd Hundley, who literally at one point was detoxing behind home plate in Busch Stadium and passed out during a game. Traded him and got 2 usable players. Got Mark Zelanik and Eric Karros for him.
Absolutely.
I don't know what Ned Colletti was thinking, but I'm glad he was thinking it.
Yeah, Ned Colletti. Yeah, and that was they had everyday second baseman, and they did not. So they were hoping, and we as fans, I think I can say this, we were all hoping that Hee Seop Choi was going to be our first baseman. He was a bulky first, with a high on base. He was one of these new Moneyball players, Korean. He just seemed cool. Patterson had really struggled in 02, but it was his first full season. They kind of threw him into the water, and so you figure, well, he'll bounce back, and there was a bounce back, although people that blame his injury on the downfall of his career, I think, are overlooking some facts. But he did contribute early on, and Choi kind of got off to a slow start. But I don't know if we want to jump to there was an epic game that summer.
Yeah, before we get to the epic game, Corey Patterson had an Ian Happ season, is what he had. He had one really good month. He happened to have it early. And so he pumped his numbers up. He had impressive numbers, and they were coming down to earth kind of fast.
Yes.
And honestly, one of the best things he did for his career, ironically, was
in the short term,
blowing out his knee when he did, because it froze his stats where they looked good. And people thought, because honestly, I think what would have happened, had he not gotten hurt, I think they still make the Kenny Lofton trade. Except then Kenny is not a 2-month fill-in for Corey. Kenny becomes potentially the not long-term, but they bring him back for 04.
Bring Kenny back.
Kenny. Because they're like, Corey...
Was that assuming that Corey... Is that assuming Corey tanks?
It's assuming that had Corey
not gotten hurt... Corey doesn't get hurt.
Corey doesn't get hurt. They have evidence that he's not that fucking good.
I don't think that organization would have done that.
Well, But don't
it
you
was
think
Jim Hendry's first full season.
Well, but you got to remember who the manager was. Henry had to literally start taking old guys away from Dusty because he wouldn't not play them. We'll get to the whole Lenny Harris thing. He literally cut Lenny Harris because Dusty kept playing him. And the only way to get him to stop playing him was to cut him. Had you given Dusty clearly would have lobbied, I need Kenny on this team next year.
Right.
But then we get to the whole thing where part of the reason Kenny didn't want to come back was Kenny and Sammy didn't like each other.
Right. Even though coincidentally Sammy was approaching the end himself, but as it turns out.
Yeah, so when Corey got hurt, he was hitting 298, which is the number.
Can I tell you another
with a
fun
511 slug?
Another fun fact that I regret not recalling in time for my top 5 is that 2003 was the season that once for sure and possibly twice, Corey Patterson was intentionally walked so the opponent could face Samuel Peralta Sosa. That happened. That happened, folks, in 2003. That's how hot Corey Patterson was for a while. Happened to dovetail with Sosa being in a cold-ass stretch, and Sammy was approaching a bit of the end, but as we would see later on, he's still capable of some shit. But it's a fact that they put Corey on base to face Sammy. One was in the freezing-ass cold game in the first Saturday in June against the Astros. So I think it went about 16 innings.
I think I told this story, right? So 2003 was the season I was the official scorer for the Blade Snappers. So
I
had a lot
stories.
going on in 03.
Yeah.
And I walk into Don Money's office after a game to give him the box score, and I know I've told this story before. That man got from his full baseball uniform to just a sleeve. He'd taken like a regular, those baseball shirts with the 3/4 sleeves, and he would just cut those sleeves off. So it basically turns into a tank top. That and his underwear. He would be within 15 seconds of the game being over. He's in a cutoff shirt and his underwear, sitting behind his big metal desk in his office. And then he had his lockers in front, and he had this shitty old TV on top of the lockers. And I walk in, and Don's just pointing at it, and he goes, "Get a look at this shit." And what this shit was Jeremy Gonzalez pitching for the Tampa Bay Devil Rays
with Lou Piniella in the dugout,
and Sammy Sosa's bat exploding, and cork showing out of it.
Yep.
So that was, Sammy got to that point where he was now trying to use a corked bat in a game because he had no bat speed.
Had they been cracking down on steroids by then, or is it less effective as you age into your upper 30s? The real crackdown came a couple years later, right?
Well,
so
it was
could have been
03
juiced until the end.
This is why it's remember this crap, not research this crap. Famous. Was 03 the year they did the testing? The results were never supposed to come out. They did survey testing, and if X amount tested positive, then the next year they would test for real. And that was when it leaked that Sammy and David Ortiz and all those guys had flunked a test, and no one is 100% sure whether they really did, or it just seemed.
You're right.
It was one of those things where it was like, if you said that, everybody's gonna be like, well, of course they did, because they were huge, and at some point, whether they did it in 03 or not, those guys had done roids, so it was very believable. But there's really some doubt that the thing people got, the few people got their hands on that showed the positive test, a lot of people think that was bullshit. That it was just somebody who picked all the usual suspects.
Okay.
And writers have used that as the proof to keep Sammy out of the Hall of Fame. And the Ricketts apparently have used that as the proof to keep him out of the illustrious Cub Hall of Fame when it comes time next year to finally indict him.
Right. Jose Canseco's book, by the way, Juiced, came out February of 2005, but I know he was talking a lot. This is before Twitter. He was talking a lot before that, but in interviews and stuff. So I think it was really the early vestiges of when people stopped putting their head in the sand about it, I guess.
Yeah, by then we were all like, well, of course these guys are on it. We weren't.
We knew it 98 though. We talked about it.
We were dumb, but we weren't stupid.
Talking to Flintstone Vitamins.
Well, when he showed up for spring training in 98, he was enormous. You had to be I took my Flintstone vitamins and pumped up. It's like,
well, that was the joke though.
Well, that was what Sammy would say. Sammy said it was his Flintstone vitamins.
Right.
So yeah, the idea that nobody knew It's like nobody had definitive proof, but everybody knew.
Well, Brady Anderson, really, 1996, 7 years earlier. That's really the outlier.
So I sold Corey Patterson short. He had 2 really good months.
04 after they got Nomar in August. Tell me I'm right. Because I feel like they got Nomar and then Dusty inexplicably put Patterson at the lead off.
No, I mean in 03.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, because he didn't go out till June, so he actually,
so
wasn't quite happy in.
He got hurt in July. In April, he hit 300 with a 330 on base, and 550 slugging, 5 homers, 22 RBIs. In May, he hit 333 with 345 on base and 565 slug. By the end of May, he had 11 homers and 42 RBIs batting leadoff. We're like, ooh, we've got a star. He cooled off a little in June, 269, 319, 452. But in July, and when he got hurt, it was only 6 games. But he was hitting 235, 278, 294. So his June and July had dropped off precipitously. And
okay.
And then the injury froze his numbers at a 298.
Yep.
And we're like, all right, here it is. When he gets back and he's healthy, he's going to be awesome. And he was never awesome.
Well, like I said, there was a stretch after they got Nomar. And incidentally, he wasn't really ever batting leadoff in 03. I just glanced at it. Dusty put Grudzelanik.
That's not right. No, that's Dusty. Center fielder has to lead off, and the second baseman has to bat second. Right. We know Dusty's rules.
Patterson was down in the order, but he actually had 7 RBIs as the Cubs pinned Tom Glavine's heirs back. And that
must have disappointed. That must have really disappointed Al Yellen.
Why? Because
remember when Al was rooting for Glavine to win his 300th in Wrigley because he would see
I was there, and it happened on a Sunday night. I was there, but I was more excited because it was Kerry Wood's return from another one of his myriad, stretches on the DL. And Wood, of course, was the starter on opening day, and that would have been his first opening day start for the Cubs. But yeah, they got off. I just feel like they. Like I said, it felt a little bit like 2007 where they played well. I think they played pretty well, but they never really looked that strong. Probably the whole season, I guess. The division was down, but they never fell too far behind, and they did have those pitchers. I mean, Wood was pretty damn good. Wood is coming off the season in which, as bad as the Cubs were, it was his first season which he didn't miss a start. So we start breathing a sigh of relief.
Well,
we have Pryor.
They only had one win-loss wise. They only had one really good month, and it was September. They went 19-8 in September, so they kicked it into gear. They were over 500 in April and May, 14-12 and 15-12. Under 500 in June and July, 12-15 and 12-14. They were 15-13 in August, and then they finished 19-8. They were helped by the fact that the Cardinals had been. Well, no. Who won the division in 02? That was
02. The Cardinals lost the pennant to the Giants. I know they went to the playoffs.
That's right.
It could have been one of those. For years, the Cardinals and Astros would both go to the playoffs.
And then in 04, the Cardinals had won like 104 games, but lost.
And the Astros also went to the playoffs.
So the Cubs found this little bubble in 03, where 88 wins would win the division because that had been the best division in the National League. And
it was pretty good.
It had an off year.
They were setting 2 teams the playoffs, for multiple seasons. You had the Pirates and the Brewers at the bottom, and the Cubs were with them, and the Cubs decided to join those guys in 03, which probably diluted that win total because they were probably winning over 90 in the previous years. I see where the Cubs were in first the entire month of May and kind of bounced in and out in June and July. But you're right, they went from, which is kind of rare, I think, but they went from July 2nd, the only day in the month of June. This is how tight the division was. The day before, on July 1st, they were in third place, a game out somehow, and then they were tied for first. But between July 2nd and basically shortly after that Cardinals series that we're going to get into, they were still not in first after that series, but they went into it down 2.5 and were still out a half. But that's when they made the move.
With a week to go, they were in second place.
I see that. Yeah.
And then you saw what happened. Then they got 3 clutch starts in a row from their stars.
Well,
Mark Pryor, Kerry Wood, and Sean Estes.
I already referenced the Sean Estes game. Before we get to, and let's get it out of the way, but before we get to the Sean Estes game, I'm just going to say one thing. As you know, I've been a season ticket holder for, since 97, and in 03, I was still living in the city. I was married, didn't have kids yet, so I was still going to my fair share of games. And however many I went to, I want to say in every single one of those games, Sean Estes was starting. Now, this is a rotation that had 3 fucking bulls, all right, that were already sort of like showing their stuff. Wood, Pryor, and of course our beloved Carlos Zambrano. Matt Clement was a hell of a 4th. I mean, I think without analyzing it, you'd have to think that the pitching really carried them, and you probably look at a lot of those games in September. So Estes, it just felt like luck of the draw. Every time I go out there, I had a 1 in 5 shot, and I would keep landing on Estes. But he did contribute in September by throwing was it a 1-hit shutout? But they were up a game, and they're barely holding on. There's less than a week's worth of games left. And Sean Estes, who was the guy that we all dumped on, we loved our 4 starting pitchers. We hated Sean Estes. And I particularly hated him because he was always pitching when I went to Wrigley Field. It was actually a 4-hit shutout. It's the Sean Estes game. So there you go, Sean. You helped us get to the playoffs.
Well, he only gave up hits to stars, though. Ryan Friel, Russell Branyan, Willie Mo Pena, and Jason LaRue.
Wow. I will always call him Wiley Mo Pena, by the way, because he didn't have an E in his name. I insist. That's a name that has not ever been uttered on this podcast. So
no, we didn't. That's the first Willie Mo Pena.
I hadn't thought about it.
A Jim Bowden favorite. He loved Willie Mo, and then he
came up with around.
He went to the Nats and he traded for him. He had to have Willie Mo on his team.
He was Jim Bowden's Sammy Sosa. He was Larry Himes's Sammy Sosa. But yeah, that was in September. I guess to pull it back, when the Cubs are sort of scrapping, you're in first place the whole month of May. We don't have a lot of experience with that, and we talked about the 77 team. So obviously, we're aware that it can go south, but we're optimistic. They're hanging in there, and we go into June. I think it's an appropriate time to put a little bit of a spotlight on a particular game, which I'm going to say, even though it had a lot of hype, it was one of the coolest Cubs games that I've ever been to. When the Yankees came to town for the first time, and it would have been since 1938, so 65 seasons. And the Yankees had played in Wrigley Field twice, in 1932 and 38, and swept the Cubs both times. So the Cubs had never beaten the Yankees at Wrigley Field. And on Friday, that fat fuck David Wells pitched for the Yankees, and the Yankees won again. So the streak was, I'm guessing, 5-0, possibly 6-0. But Saturday was just one of those unique incidences, in history and in sports history, where the stars align. And the build-up is Roger Clemens. I was going to say Hall of Famer Roger Clemens, but he's laughably is not a Hall of Famer. Coming to town with the New York Yankees, who still had that glow. They hadn't won a World Series in a couple of years, but they'd still won 4 of the previous 7, and they were a power. But the story, of course, was that Clemens was going for his 300th win.
Yep.
And he was also hoping that was the day his son could utter more than 2 words. We'll get to that. But but on the other end, which
Cody with a K,
go Yankees. The drama, because we're not done here, of course, is that our guy, Kerry Wood, who we've talked about a lot on this, and we still will, because he pitched in parts of 8-9 seasons, I think, but also from Texas, like Clemens, and I think. Our hope, our most optimal take on Wood when he arrived with a flash and took the league by storm is that he was the successor to in a line of succession, starting with Nolan Ryan and carrying through Roger Clemens. That Wood was there to take the mantle, and at this point we still thought that was possible because he'd stayed healthy for a year and a half. But Wood was the pitcher on the other end, the fellow Texan. So a lot at stake. National TV game. Beautiful June afternoon. My brother almost got into a fight with some asshole in a Yankees shirt that kept standing up in the aisle in front of us. But nevertheless, one of those rare instances where the game itself, the results of the game, probably even exceeded those expectations. I'm sure you'd agree.
Yeah, and
there's more things that happen.
Do you remember? You remember what Roger was doing after every inning?
Changing jerseys and trying to cash in.
And he had this big metal trunk that they had lugged into the dugout. I guess because the clubhouse, the visiting clubhouse, is famously not anywhere near the dugout. So he was after every
shitty hole in the wall too. On top of it.
So after every inning, he would go down into the hallway, take his jersey off, fold it up, put it in the trunk, and put another one on. Because if, say, he pitched 7 innings, he wanted 7 jerseys. He'd keep one, probably give one to the Hall of Fame, and then he could sell 5 of them because he wore them during his 300th win. And Fox was making a big fucking deal. That's probably why I remember it more than you, because you were at the game. And it was really pissing me off. It's just
it's obnoxious. It's pretty obnoxious. Yeah.
And it's ironic, though, that the game is less remembered for Rod. I mean, obviously, if you're a Cub fan or a Yankee fan, you remember him going for the 300th win, but that's not what you remember the game for. There's 2 other moments that you remember more.
Like iconic moments that everyone listening, I'm sure. We don't have any fans that started following the Cubs in 2005. At least I would be terrified to think of that. So the aforementioned Hee Seop Choi. Well, first of all, I think the game itself was tight. I'm just going to say that what's the guy's name? Matsui. He hit a homer into the basket off of Wood in the 5th. Then, so the game is living up to the hype.
And then bragged about his extensive porn collection. I'm sure all his way around.
But yeah, so that happened in the 5th inning, but not before. That was the inning after this moment happened. Our aforementioned Korean first baseman, Hee Seop Choi, who is, we were a fan of him. He was struggling a little bit though. His
name was fun to chant. Everybody liked to chant. Hee Seop Choi. In fact, fans the next year were still chanting it at Derek Lee when he got off to a very slow start.
Yeah, that figures.
They came around.
New Yankee hire, a new Yankee acquisition, Jason Giambi. It might have been his second season with the Yanks. He hits a pop-up with 1 out in the 4th. And Kerry Wood, as a pitcher, should, of course, really have no business going for a pop-up.
Kerry, though.
He's Kerry.
He's not a pitcher. He's an athlete. He's
going to
catch it.
A little bit of an athlete with a little bit of a granite for a skull. And when that might have contributed to what happened next when the pitcher, Kerry Wood, and first baseman Hee Seop Choi collide violently. And I don't even remember, was the ball Choi caught the ball, but was rendered unconscious, I believe. Certainly had a concussion and was immobile.
He hit his...
On the ground.
He missed the grass. He hit the base path. And so he hit the dirt.
That's what it was.
Which didn't help.
Right. Which then led to the completely bizarre, witness, just the bizarre event of the right field wall doors, the doors on the right field wall at Wrigley Field, which you would see when they would maybe sometimes wheel in a batting cage or something like that.
Like a 68 Gran Torino to give to Billy Williams in 1972 on Billy Williams Day. It's like, it's used?
Oh, PK Wrigley. But then, we see, so, it's kind of funny to think too that the iconic firehouse, which houses, EMT, has the fire truck. And I think there's a ambulance in there right on Waveland. They had to wheel out. In fact, it came from there because I remember hearing the brrr, because my seats are near the left field corner, and you kind of heard a thing just to get out of the way. Not that they didn't have to blare or anything. So this ambulance pulls out of the fire station, drives down to down Waveland to Sheffield, hangs a right, and then enters the ballpark from the right field wall, and then drove on and was able to get Hee Seop carted off. Unfortunately, it was pretty much the end. We talk about Patterson finishing his season. Unfortunately, it wasn't the end of Corey, but this actually turned out to be the end of Hee Seop.
Yeah,
but
it's a good thing that didn't happen in 2015 to 2020. The ambulance coming on the field, because you would have never gotten Kyle Schwarber out of the ambulance. He would have been so excited. He would have gotten on it, and he would have wanted to go for a ride. And he would have wanted to play with the lights and the siren. My brother had a dog that this big golden lab or a yellow lab named Bo, and for a while it was living with Jim was remodeling a house, and so he needed the dog to stay on the farm.
Okay.
And so it was very tenuously coexisting with my dog, Rex. They were fine until the weather started to get cold, and then they started fighting over who was going to lay on the porch. But anyway, if my dad would get in the truck, if he had to be careful, because if Bo would run by him and jump in the truck. If he got in the truck, you had to take him somewhere. You could not physically get him out of the truck unless you went somewhere. And all Dad would have to do is drive down the road, make a U-turn, come back, open the door, and he would get out happy as hell. But
Nice.
you could not get Bo out of the truck. And I just picture Kyle Schwarber doing the same thing. Just getting in the ambulance, and the ambulance having to drive around the field a couple of times, and then the door opens and Kyle finally gets out.
Oh, yeah. Well, unfortunately, Hee Seop was, I think, rendered too immobile to put up such resistance.
So that's the only time, right, that an ambulance has been on the field at Wrigley Field.
Well, I'm sure it was for Bears games. I'm sure they probably had.
Well,
one
yeah,
already
I mean
in.
for the Cubs. Now, do you remember
bizarre.
years later when the Cubs? It was Mother's Day. The Cubs were playing the Cardinals in kind of a monsoon. There'd been a delay, but they were going to try to play through it. And Eli Marrero
ripped his.
And they
up
brought
in
out
field.
that weird. It was like a chair that they put him in, and they wheeled him out through that door on a chair. It was the funniest thing ever. My brother-in-law was a Cardinals fan. I think he's still mad about it. It should have been playing. They ruined Eli Marrero's career. It's like, it's fucking Eli Marrero. Who cares?
Yeah, they had to cart him off like he was Eddie Murphy in Coming to America, right?
Yeah, that's exactly.
I remember it was Mother's Day. We were at a brunch in Arlington Heights, and Eli Marrero, who was their catcher, is in right field. So they didn't bring the ambulance on for Eli.
That's probably what happened. They're like, remember Eli Marrero. We got to get the actual ambulance.
# remember Eli. So bye-bye Hee Seop, and symbolically it was kind of the end. He was dealt after the season. He never needed to come back. Pretty much from that moment, veteran Eric Karros, who we referred to as having been acquired along with Mark Rudzelanek for Todd Hundley, as you kind of indicated, Andy, we would have accepted just like a bag of sliders from White Castle.
Right. We just wanted Hundley gone. The fact that
it was nice to have Rudzelanek
that could play was amazing.
Rudzelanek was a good player, good prospect, had a decent career. He was the first player that Kerry Wood ever pitched on Easter Day, 1998. And Kerry struck him out, but good player for the Expos, the Dodgers, and wore out his welcome. And so he gets plugged into the lineup right away. And Karros didn't, which is, could have happened because Dusty was the manager. And I think being fans, sometimes you're a little more optimistic about what you don't know about the prospects. We were all kind of behind Hee Seop, and that's who we had. Shows you what we know. But, of course, Karros has to come into this game and the rest of the season, probably to the Cubs' benefit, as it turns out. But in the game, an inning after Choi gets knocked out, Matsui hits the homer, and it's 1-0. So the pitching matchup lives up to it, lives up to the hype. And in the seventh, there's Roger Clemens going for his 300th win. He is not going to go the distance after Patterson strikes out to lead off the inning. Good old Sammy gets a nice seeing eye single through the hole, and Moises draws a walk. And at that point, Joe Torre feels, well, this is such a media fucking circus. It needed to end. I just need this guy to get a win, and he's not going to go the distance. And so he brings in Juan Acevedo, who is just one of those names I'm sure Cub fans remember more than Yankee fans. On the first pitch to newly installed Eric Karros in what would be Karros's second at bat of the game. Clemens struck him out in the fifth while striking out the side. Karros deposited one right in front of us, deep left field, off the fence in the left field catwalk, and suddenly the Cubs have a 3-1 lead. So they hold on, but not before Mike Remlinger comes in a bases loaded situation, I believe, in the eighth inning. Comes in and has to face Jason Giambi and strikes him out. Another awesome moment in that game because it could turn.
Great moment, and Dusty improperly using his bullpen. Remlinger was a lefty, but Remlinger was righties could not hit him, and lefties
that's right.
mostly
He was a
handled him.
reverse split
And
guy,
Dusty
yeah.
would never reverse split him ever. He's like, oh, he's left-handed. You got to push his lefties. It's like, here, look at the numbers. Just look at them. And he would
Well,
just
it worked
never,
out.
never
Yeah,
do it.
in spite of himself, it worked out here because he got Giambi on a 3-2 count. And, yeah, the bases were loaded with 2 outs. It was still a 3-1 game. Cubs got 2 insurance runs. Sweaty Joe gave up a leadoff homer to Posada, but otherwise had no problem. Cubs beat the Yankees for the first time ever. And the best part about it is that the losing pitcher was Roger Clemens.
Very good. Was the next night, the Sunday night game,
Mark Pryor.
where they picked Charles Gibson off first base to end the game?
Yes. Mark Pryor, and I believe Andy Pettit was the matchup. I could be wrong. Another good matchup if that was the case.
Had that been, that's the clutchest Cub pickoff before Jose Lobaton. Except the Cubs didn't go out and ever get Charles Gibson and make him try to play for them like they did Lobaton.
Are we sure about that? Okay.
Well, it could still happen, maybe. He's probably He's probably only in his mid-40s.
Yeah, great week. I was actually at a Jewish wedding, and I say a Jewish wedding because they're very common on Sunday evenings. But I was able to catch the end of that game when we got back home because it's Sunday night, and I think playoff fever really probably sparked that weekend. I mean, we knew we possibly had a good team. Things got to break our way, but you take 2 out of 3 from the Yankees, you got to feel good. So I think at this point, it's early June. I know we've had 1977, but a lot of us that's before our time. And usually when the Cubs, up until this point, it's not very often, they're playing really well into June. Yeah, usually good things happen. Usually.
So they kind of muddle.
I don't even remember that they played the Orioles next. I just remember, I think Dave Kelton made his debut then, and in his very first plate appearance, Dusty had him try to lay down a bunt.
Of course.
That's all I'm going to say there. So got the Dave Kelton reference. Carry on.
So the season was, the division had come back to them for the season, and so they were contending, and they had, with Corey still playing, they had one gaping hole in their lineup. They did not have a third baseman.
And
so they were trying everybody there. Mark Bellhorn was playing there.
It's a shame that Bellhorn didn't work out because he had a breakthrough year the year before playing third. He was a weird Moneyball like high on base switch hitter with power, but he contributed to Boston's title I think the next year possibly or something. Yeah. But I think he was the opening day third baseman.
The irritating thing about it was even with him struggling, he was still a much better option than Lenny Harris. But Dusty kept giving Lenny starts.
Yep, and Lenny was like 38,
right?
Wasn't he?
And Lenny didn't want to fucking play third base. Lenny just wanted to pinch hit.
He's a pinch hit, maybe a corner outfielder in a put him on the infield, really, at the hot corner. Come on.
So he got him. Lenny played in 75 games before the Cubs finally released him. Ironically, he ended up with the Marlins, so he won the World Series. And I remember I was positive that he was going to get the winning hit in the NLCS against the Cubs. I just knew it was going to happen, and he didn't. But I thought, in fact, it was future Cubs got hits like Todd Dunwoody and Todd Hollandsworth. And,
so Hollins was scoring a run. And Derek Lee, of course.
So they had this huge hole, and finally Jim Hendry just released Lenny. Lenny was hitting 183.
By the way, Lenny was 38. He had 146 plate appearances. You might be looking at. You know what his OPS was? Want to guess?
Well, I know he's hitting 183. So, oh God, 484.
484.
His OPS plus was 28. Keep starting that guy. Thanks a lot. So we get down towards the end of July, and I remember this. It was funny. Trades were announced in a weird. Like now, you see it on Twitter or whatever.
Yes,
I distinctly remember Jim Hendry in the booth with Chip and Steve.
They would do that sometimes,
walking us through the
dropping
trade.
A scoop.
And it was funny because they get 2 players in the trade. They get Kenny Lofton and Aramis Ramirez. That's
in one trade with Pittsburgh. There were 2 trades with Pittsburgh, though, right? Okay.
Yeah. Well, there was a waiver trade later.
Oh, Randall Simon. Yeah.
They everybody's like, so here's Aramis Ramirez, right? Legitimately one of the best Cub players in history. He really is.
One of the best third basemen, one of the best,
he was
one of my favorites.
And he was the key part of the trade, but he was not the guy everybody was talking about. Oh, Kenny Lofton, we got Kenny. We finally replaced. Yep. They're making a huge deal out of Kenny, and it's like, guys, they didn't make the trade for Kenny. They made the trade for Aramis, and Kenny's come with because they need a center fielder. And Kenny at that point was changing teams every year.
Yeah, Aramis had come up as like a 20-year-old and struggled.
19 when he broke in.
Yeah, and he got 650. Yeah, but when he was 23, is the first time he got more than 275 plate appearances, and he had an 885 OPS in 01, and he was 23 years old. And then he had a slump in 02, but still had some numbers. But yeah, I remember he was on my radar. I was playing rotisserie baseball. I was excited. You could tell he had potential just the way he looked. And he contributed immediately, and he would contribute actually he would have a career as long as just about, most guys that we'd seen, not named Ryan Sandberg and Sammy Sosa.
So in 2001 for the Pirates, he was 23 years old. So yeah, he broke in when he was 20. He hit 300 with a 350 on base, a 536 slug, 34 homers, 112 RBIs. But then he struggled in 2002. He only hit 234. He went down to 18 homers and 71 RBIs. And so the Pirates are like, well, clearly this guy is not good.
Even though his OPS was back up to 778 in the first few months in 03.
Yeah, in 03, he was 280, 330 for them. He actually had better...
They were giving up on him.
He had a better batting average and on base for the Pirates than he did the Cubs in 03, but he had much better slugging with the Cubs. And so they just gave up on him. And they're like, all right, you take this guy. And Jim Hendry's like, okay.
Yeah. Was it like Dave Brubeck?
No, not Dave Brubeck. Not the Jazz guy, Dave. It was his son, drummer. Matt. So it was...
Jose. That's why Jose Hernandez. He was on the 03
right.
Cubs.
And I thought of that as soon as I saw that. Well, yeah, he was in the Aramis
correct.
trade.
Because we talked about when they dealt Hernandez in 90 when we did last episode was 1999. That was the big deal. Jose Hernandez was the prized nugget that the Cubs had to deal when they got with Joey Nation, Will, and the rest of that swag. So he came back, and the Cubs dealt him to really get something in return this time.
Yeah. So it was Matt Brubeck, Jose Hernandez, and a player named later who would end up being Bobby Hill.
Who was basically, let's complete the Trinity, right? Being prospect hounds and being hopelessly optimistic about the future. It was Corey Patterson, Hee Seop Choi, and Bobby Hill. That's what our future was that we were excited about. And so it was kind of coming together, at least for Patterson and Choi in 03 until it suddenly wasn't. But Hill was quickly an afterthought anyway.
Well, and Bobby was a big deal because the White Sox had drafted him, and he had refused to sign.
Right.
And then 2 years later, he's back in the draft, and the Cubs drafted him.
So it would have been we were a little bit geeked because it would have been fun if he was awesome with the Cubs because of that.
But it ended up he was awesome adjacent. He got us Aramis Ramirez.
Yep.
So they make that trade, and at the time, because everybody was focused on the Kenny Lofton part, it's like, I don't know, we're giving up guys, and this team might not really even be in this. Well, the fact that they were getting a 24-year-old third baseman who would play for them for a decade, even if they hadn't contended that year, the trade is a winner.
What the hell were the Pirates going to do with Jose Hernandez? Like, who was it? Who would be the guy? Dave Littlefield, Huntington? I don't know who was making their deals. Was it Sid Thrift? So now we're pretty much ready to talk about the Labor Day weekend, which is, I think the most iconic part of the season. When you talk about how fun the season was, but you don't remember that because of how it ended. But the fun really culminated in the epic 5-game series. 5 games, of course, because the game earlier had been postponed. And even during this series, I think the weather was a little bit inclement because the first game was on Labor Day. I know it says it started at 1:20, but I have a memory that it was kind of in the evening. It was kind of a non-eventful game, just kind of an appetizer. Pryor went against Woody Williams, I think, and the Cubs rolled. Of course,
the thing about this game that irritated me was because it interrupted the Jerry Lewis telethon.
Right. I mean, usually you get the Cubs game out of the way, and then Jerry Lewis gets to continue.
Now,
do you think the evening.
Do you think Tom Dreesen would refuse to go on during a Cubs game on the Jerry Lewis telethon? Think he had enough pull to be like, Jerry, Cubs are on then. GN's not going to be carrying the telethon. My mom's not going to be able to see me. You got to book me after the game. Plus, I got to watch the game. Ever tell you about the time I was a bat boy?
Jerry, take a load off. Here's a painkiller for you.
Was this the year that Jerry was all hopped up on prednisone and his
head
was like the size of a watermelon?
Right. I do want to say the telethon may have been going on as late as 2000.
Oh, it was. I guarantee you. I remember that. I think the Cubs had to hurry off. GN had to wrap up coverage. Even though we had this big win, we were all excited. We beat the Cardinals the first game of the big series. They had to hurry up to get back to Jerry because on Labor Day the telethon would end at 5 o'clock or something, right? Because it would go Sunday into Monday, and then Jerry by then would be his tie would be off, and he'd be half in the bag. Right. And they're like, "Shit, we got to get to the end of the telethon. We got to get the big tally at the end." So shut up, Chip. We're going to Jerry.
It's kind of funny how much Cub fans in particular probably have these unique memories of the Jerry Lewis telethon because it would every year run headlong somehow into a Cubs broadcast. Because,
either Sunday night or Monday or both.
Yeah, and so and I don't even know. Maybe this wasn't even a GN game. Who knows? Maybe Jerry had to work all the way through.
I distinctly remember that they went to the telethon after the game. That's a real memory of mine.
Was that before or after Mark Pryor had thrown 130 some odd pitches in a 7-0 game? Which I see here. Yeah, he threw
I only made him throw 8, dude. I was conserving his arm.
So that's a little bit of foreshadowing. So the Cubs take the first game, and this is important because going into the series, Cubs have been battling. It's a 3-horse race. They come into the series and they're they're in third place coming in. I want to say
they were in third place until
they
moved into second at the end of the series on the last day.
But they weren't that far. They're only a game and a half out of first, but or 2.5 before this game, and then they pick up the game. The doubleheaders the next day I think that was where all the history, all the fireworks went off somewhere during the course of that entire day. It was a doubleheader, but it was, I believe, the first ever split doubleheader. The Cubs finally got in on that action.
I mean, day-night.
Day-night, not split doubleheader. Duh. Yeah, day-night doubleheader instead of just getting 2 for the price of 1.
Think how excited John McDonough was.
Right. It's come to fruition. So
2 games.
Instead of 2 for 1, where you just get, 2 for 1, you get to watch 2 games for 1 ticket. Cubs are going to fill up the ballpark in the middle of a pennant race on Labor Day or the day after Labor Day for the first game, empty it, and then fill it up again, which would be the one game that I would go to, incidentally. I went to the one game they lost that evening. However, what made things really sort of dramatic and kind of hilarious, considering the Cubs are trying to really cash in on this day-night nonsense, is that the first game went, 15 innings or something like that?
It went 15 innings. It went 4 hours and 47 minutes, meaning it finished at 6:07.
You got an hour.
Got to empty the ballpark, kids. We got a brand new crowd coming.
38,000. Well, let's see. They have the attendance. 31,000. It was only 31,000 for the day. It was a day game. It was on Tuesday.
Yeah, but the night game was the biggest one of the series.
Yeah, and I was one of the participants. But yeah, so somehow they had to manage those logistics. The Cubs win the first 2 games of the series, so we're feeling good.
Well, how did game 1 end?
And that's the other. Yeah, that's a great point because it was one of Sammy's countless walk-offs that he had hit in his career. Right? Was it Sammy or Moises?
No, it was Sammy.
Okay, got it.
Let's see, who did he hit it off of?
And he had so many, and he still would.
So Woody Williams started that game. Jeff Facero ended it. Augie Ojeda had singled, and then with 1 out, Sammy hit
a walk-off in the 15th inning.
So let's see how long did Woody pitch, because this becomes important later.
No, Woody did not. Woody pitched the game before, right? Woody pitched the day before.
Oh, you're right. This was Jason Simon Tachi.
Oh, yeah. I remember.
Yeah, because Woody had well, that's what I want to look at. Woody pitched the opener. So I guess.
Yeah, on Labor Day.
All right, I guess this makes a little more sense when he reappears.
Later. Yeah. So he Yeah, but this one, Sammy, 2 in a row for the Cubs, and now we're going for the jugular. Matt Morris is on the hill. We all loathe Matt Morris.
Mouth-breathing Matt Morris.
I think it was at the end of the season, end of the series, in fact, when he made the incredibly unsportsmanlike comment about considering tanking just to keep the Cubs out of the playoffs or something. That's how much he
literally said he wanted the Astros to make the playoffs because he didn't want the Cubs to.
Yeah, if it couldn't be them. So yeah, real class guy, Matt Morris. Still good pitcher, objectively pretty good against the Cubs, and he was that night. I think that night will be remembered if any fan remembers it, and I certainly do from my seats in 204 because it didn't happen far from me. But otherwise insignificant game, other than the fact that in a 2-0 loss at one point, Moises Alou hit a rope right over the third baseman's head, and the umpire ruled it foul. It was close. It was before replay. I can't remember if it was really fair or foul. Umpire happened to be standing about 15 feet away from the Cubs bullpen, which back then, of course, was out in the open along the wall in left field. And his call prompted 12-fingered Antonio Alfonseca to spring from his seat to argue with the umpire. And I think just the force of Antonio propelling itself forward bumped into the umpire, and he was ejected from the game in which he was not even playing. And that was the highlight of that. Very frustrating loss.
Was it Jesse? Is he the one who famously asked Alfonseca if he was born with 12 fingers?
Who did you ask who it was?
Jesse Rogers.
I think you're right. Yeah. I think you may have recited that recently.
Alfonseca, also 12 toes. But pretty sure you have to be born that way. I don't think they sprout later in life.
Alfonseca did nothing with the Cubs good for the most part. He was acquired the year before with Clement, as we mentioned at the beginning. That's pretty much Alfonseca's highlight. It was kind of comical, his fat belly bouncing out, and it was cute. He was defending the Cubs. We all wanted the Cubs to win. That would turn out to be the only loss in the series. The next day was really kind of, I think, this is probably the day where La Russa and Baker were jawing at each other. I don't remember which game, but
I hope it
was probably the next one. I don't know.
Yeah, this was the Cardinals get 2 in the first, and then they tack on 4 in the 6th when against Matt Clement. Orlando Palmeiro walks. Edgar Renteria flies out. Mike Matheny, pre-real estate empire. Mike Matheny.
Pre-accidentally hitting a hammer into his head. They probably didn't have.
Well, remember he missed the playoffs one year because he cut himself with a hunting knife in the
around this time. It might have been the year before.
I think he was trying to commit suicide. Just missed in his hand.
It's a cover story.
Matheny singles. Dan Heron bunts.
Future Cub.
Gets those guys over to second and third.
Heron was a youngster too.
And then in comes the second greatest Felix in Cubs history. Not Felix Heredia, but Felix Sanchez.
Oh
and
my God.
He's end up face Fernando Vina. Got to get him out, and he walks him.
Fucking Vina.
He then J.D. Drew comes up, left on left, no problem. Grand slam to center field.
Jesus. So
Cubs are down 6-0, and now he's got to deal with Albert Pujols, who he smartly walks. And then remember when Tino Martinez was a Cardinal?
Vaguely.
Tino flies out to end the inning.
So he was already a Cardinal by 03. Wow. I would not have guessed that.
It was his one and only year, right? Maybe he hung around.
I suppose.
He was a flop for them, which was great.
Good, yeah. That works for us.
Cubs are down 6-0. Everyone at Wrigley is, not only is the game over, but the season's over. The fucking Cardinals have done it to us again.
Well, the series is split now, and it's just
we didn't gain any ground, and wah. But Sammy reaches on a ground rule double against former Cub Dan Heron.
Future Cub.
Future Cub. He's former now, but he's future then.
Yes, at this point in time.
We're not sure whether the ball ended up in the ivy or in a grate or stuck to a bird's beak and it flew off.
Yosh Kawano's pith helmet. Yeah.
Then Moises singles in Sammy. Now it's 6-1. Randall Simon, who we'll get to in a second, he flies out.
Oh, love Randall. Yep.
And then Aramis Ramirez hits a home run, and now it's 6-3, and Wrigley's abuzz again. Everybody's excited. Alex Gonzalez walks. Oh, I missed a key point here. After Moises singles in Sammy, Jeff Fassero back on the mound. He's the
troll.
one. He's the one who gave up the home run to Aramis. Wrigley's rocking again. Alex Gonzalez walks. Damian Miller doubles. Alex does not score. Still, there's only one out. Runners at second and third, one out. Here's Karros. He strikes out. Kenny Lofton walks. Bases are loaded. Doug Glanville grounds out to short. So still 6-3.
Okay. Doug was already back by then.
To make things worse, El Pulpo is in to pitch the seventh, and he gives a run back. So now it's 7-3. And Tony says, all right, it's Russ Springer time. Cubs greet Russ rudely. Sammy walks. Moises hits a home run. 7-5. With two outs. Alex Gonzalez homers. Now it's 7-6.
Love it. Gonzalez had a number. I know he's known for one thing. It's by the fact that even in his time he was known as a defensive whiz, but he had this uncanny ability.
I think he's known for three things. He's known for the error in Game 6.
Yes, which we'll
talk
about.
He's known for that being part of the shirtless shortstop picture.
I don't remember that. Sorry.
And I remember the fact that he got hit on the forearm. Then the year they traded for Nomar, one of the things they did, he got hit on the forearm with a pitch.
First base.
The ump. I don't know if he said he didn't get out of the way or didn't hit. I think he thinks it didn't hit him. He broke his arm.
He broke his arm on a play in which he did not even earn a trip to first base. I should probably put that in the top 3. But I was going to say excellent defensive shortstop, that error notwithstanding, just like Leon Durham was an excellent first baseman. But also he was a low batting average guy, not a good hitter like shortstops of the 70s, but he had power. And he actually had about 3 walk-offs in 2002, his first year. And he had a walk-off in 2003 earlier in the year. I remember it might have been against the Cardinals, in fact, in May. He had big home runs, and this one, of course, pretty huge. So
good old number 8.
That's right.
So Cubs are down 7-6 in the 8th. Steve Klein is in to pitch for the Cardinals.
God, I hated that guy. Jesus, you just brought back a name that triggered me. I hate that guy.
And Dusty plays a little dusty ball. Tony Womack singles. Kenny Lofton bunts him to second. And here's Mark Grudzielanek, who triples to tie the game.
Beautiful.
Wrigley is up for grabs. And here's Sammy with 1 out. All he's got to do, hit one deep in the outfield. The Cubs take the lead. They'll wrap it up. It'll be exciting. He pops out to Tino in foul territory. So now it's up to Moises.
Right.
He comes through. He singles. Grudzielanek scores. Cubs take the lead. And it's Sweaty Joe time. He's got to get through the gauntlet of Orlando Palmeiro, Edgar Renteria, and pinch hitter Jim Edmonds.
Oh, come on, bring it on.
He gets Palmeiro to fly out. He strikes out Edgar, and he strikes out Edmonds, swinging to end the game.
So looking down the barrel of a series split, now they're up 3-1. But we're feeling it.
Yeah, the curious move by Tony in the 8th. After Klein only pitched to Womack and Lofton, then he brings back Game 1 starter Woody Williams on 2 days rest.
Wow.
And he's the one who gave up the triple to Grudzielanek and the single to Moises.
Shocker. I mean, come on. This is like the first week in September. Don't you have more arms? Tony, what's he trying to prove there, I wonder?
Well, wait till he does that shit in the playoffs for the White Sox.
Yeah, good point.
They don't call him the genius for nothing.
You know, you mentioned Womack and Lofton back-to-back. I just want to remind you that you made a hilarious observation at this time during the series.
As I'm one to do.
Yes, every decade or so.
And
but
make one every decade.
Reminding us somehow in a cosmic coincidence that in 2001, the Diamondbacks walked off their way to a pennant when Tony Womack hit a series-ending walk-off hit against the Cardinals. And in 2002, I think Kenny Lofton may have done something the same, like a walk-off homer to end the series or something extremely similar.
Sure he did.
And it just so happened that they were both on the 2003 Cubs, and that at that point, all that Dusty had to do was have Womack and Lofton stand on the top step of the dugout and wave to La Russa.
The Womack hit, I think it was the DS, not the CS, but it's most famous for after he gets the hit, Fox shows his family in the stands, and then somebody plunks the headset on Tony right down on the field there in the Bob. And Joe Buck is interviewing him, and he says, "Hey," he said, "after you got the big hit, we got a great shot of your mom celebrating in the stands." And Tony goes, "That's my wife."
How do you recover from that?
So now it's game 5, and it's time to get greedy.
Cubs going for the jugular. We're feeling it. It's September.
Pitching matchup of both teams' aces. I would guess that even though it was a day game, that Fox probably broke into programming just to show it because it was Brett Tomko and Sean Estes. Oh, maybe they didn't.
Oh, was I at the game? No, I was not at this game. So no.
Cubs capitalize on all their momentum by immediately surrendering 2 runs in the first. But how are you not when Bo Hart is leading off for the Cardinals? 3 more runs. And then the Cardinals tie it in the 7th. And in the bottom of the 7th, the Cubs take the lead again. So every time the Cardinals would take the lead, the Cubs would come back.
Which has got to be so disheartening at this point with St. Louis. You've already pissed away a game the day before where you had a 6-0 lead. You're fighting for your lives. So what a great feeling to be in the Cubs' shoes there. They just keep snatching it back.
And in the 7th, they had taken the lead when Remlinger gave up a single to Mike Matheny.
Right-handed hitter. So that would just make Dusty make sure he never did that again.
So bottom of the 7th, with the Cubs, with it tied, Troy O'Leary grounds out, Moises walks, Aramis gets hit by a pitch, and then the great Tony Womack with a big hit.
Just continuing to torture them. And by the way, I looked it up just now. Kenny Lofton did have the series ended on a 2-out walk-off single.
There you go.
In the bottom of the 9th inning. And that was an LDS off of Steve Klein, which is very, very satisfying. And I'm sorry, it was the NLCS, but it was not a Game 7, but still. Game 5. They won that series easily, but so Lofton ends it the year after Womack ends it, and they're all running around the field in this series.
So the Cubs take the lead in the 7th. Remlinger and the Farns get through the 8th. Of course, with Remlinger pitching to the only lefty, and then Farns coming in to pitch to 3 righties, even though Remlinger got righties up better than lefties.
Right. Dusty never quite figured that out.
And then Sweaty Joe with he faced 4 batters in the 9th. He got Miguel Cairo, former Cub, who Ed Lynch had lost on waivers.
That's right. We talked about that.
And then he hit Fernando Vina, because it was the only thing Fernando Vina was any good for, was getting hit either by a ball or by Albert Bell.
Right.
And then the toughest combo he ever faced, he struck out Kerry Robinson, and he got Orlando Palmeiro to fly out. And the Cubs had won 4 of 5.
It's about as satisfying as it gets. That really kind of culminated.
They're, in theory, a missed foul fair ball away from a 5-game sweep.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So in typical Cub fashion, now they're red hot, and they go to play dead-ass Milwaukee over the weekend. And what do you think they do in those 3 games?
Well, if it was 2021, I would say they get swept.
They won them all.
Even 2018. There you go. I was at a wedding that Saturday night. I know it now. Randall Simon, our friend, hit a home run in that game. I guarantee you. But you know what? Before we dive into any of these games in the playoffs, I wanted to circle back so we don't forget it. There was a point in the season, and I remember this, and now it's come back to me, where the season really felt like it was on the brink, and it was in late July, mid-July, somewhere on there, but it was in the Astrodome. Carlos Zambrano was pitching against, I think it was Wade Miller of Houston. And I'm going to try to pull it up real quick because I would be remiss if I didn't this is a very significant game in the 2003 season. Cubs enter the game, a game under 500. It's late July. They're about to fade. They're 5.5 games out, which was the furthest they'd been out of first place the entire season. As it turned out, that was the low point by every metric. In this game, on a Friday night in Houston, It's not going their way. Cubs are losing. They jump out into Karros. They get 3 in the bottom of the first. Cubs scratch 1 out in the 6th. In the 7th, Carlos Zambrano, our guy, still pitching, still batting, which, credit to Dusty on this one. Hits a game time.
If Lenny Harris had been around, he would have been hitting.
Dusty may have burned him earlier for some righty-righty, lefty-lefty. But no, Zambrano goes yard. And I'm sorry, not the Astrodome. They were in Enron Field by then. And may not even have been.
And I remember it was a
Minute Maid Park,
and it was a bomb. Like he didn't hit like a wall scraper. Carlos hit a bomb.
That's my memory. I would my country for that video. I wonder if it's out there. It turned the season around. It really did. We sarcastically talk about Nefi Perez in 2005 saving the season.
Season saved.
But you really want to look at a point where they were looking into the abyss. That team, they were a game under. They could have faded all the things that of course, it would have spared us some agony at the end too, I suppose. But it was huge. The Cubs got 2 more in the next. They won that game. I couldn't even tell you how it went from there, but I already pointed out that they were 5.5 games, and that was their low point. So, just wanted to enter that into the record, Your Honor.
So, after they win 4-5 against the Cardinals, then they have to go to Milwaukee. Do you remember the off-the-field drama associated with them going to Milwaukee?
Yes, I do. The aforementioned Randall Simon, whom the Cubs acquired after the deadline, I think.
Randall Simon, who was only a Cub because the Cubs had worked out a trade with Texas for Rafael Palmeiro, and Palmeiro was blocking it because he didn't want he didn't want to go to the Cubs for one reason. He wanted to stay in Texas long term. He was a free agent to be, and he wanted to re-sign with the Rangers, and he didn't want to leave. And the Rangers kept telling him, we're not going to bring you back. You should go. And he didn't believe them. And then he blocked the trade, and then they signed Will Clark in the offseason.
Right. His old
and that's
rival.
How he ended up. That's how
teammate.
He ended up in Baltimore. So the Cubs still needed they wanted a lefty to platoon with Karros because Hee Seop had scrambled his brains.
Correct.
And so they end up doing a waiver trade for Randall Simon. And earlier in the year, Randall had gained some fame for during the Brat race in Milwaukee. They run right by the visiting dugout, and Randall pretended like he was going to hit one of them in the head with his bat, and he tapped them on the head and knocked a girl running in one of the suits, knocked her on her ass. And he got charged with assault with a deadly weapon in Milwaukee. And so there was there was fear that now he was a Cub, and I think the Pirates were done with going to Milwaukee. He had to go back to Milwaukee, and there was fear they were going to cuff him and haul him off again, and they didn't.
I remember that now. It was ridiculous. I remember how overblown the whole thing was in the first place because he was just having some fun. It's all he was fucking doing. Take me out to the ball game, goddammit. And didn't hit the person in the head with a bat. They had the top heavy
he hit the weenie in the head. The actual person's head is like 3 feet below that. They're looking through a hole like in the chest.
And she stumbled and blah, 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 and this and that, and people chuckle, and somehow it makes its way to the Milwaukee PD who feel that it's serious enough to be.
Now, at the time, was the sheriff in Milwaukee?
Was that guy with stolen valor? What is that guy?
Well, the asshole with the cowboy hat who pops up on Fox all the time. I bet it was.
Yeah, could have been. Could have been. He's so self-loathing that he could probably just because there was like a racial element with Simon because he was the guy when John Rocker had flamed out. And this is just a horrible thing to bring up, but it happened. It was published, the Sports Illustrated article, in Rocker's career, of course, justifiably, sort of came to a halt. But Randall Simon was the player to whom Rocker referred to as like the big fat monkey, I think. Just horrible stuff. I mean, however, he was from Curacao, same country as Andrew Jones, I think. Yep. He's a fun-loving guy, beautiful smile, whatever.
Hey, he's Dutch. He's just a big, happy Dutchman. Just like Rick Smits.
And Bert Blyleven. So, Yeah, it was. I felt bad for him even before he came to the Cubs. Like they're making they're making a mountain out of a molehill. Guy was just having fun. It was just sad, and so it was perfect justice that he ends up, for his sake at least, in an important role. And he had a number of big hits. I'm going to jump back to one more game because it's not every year that Mike Donahue gets to see the Cubs in another ballpark. But work happened to bring me down to Houston, not during the Carlos Zambrano series, but a month later. A weeknight series. The Cubs happened to be in town. I was in Houston, got tickets, and watched Mark Pryor pitch, and that would be Wednesday, August 20th. And I'll never forget what a shot Randall Simon hit in that game to help Pryor lead to I'm sure 190 pitch shutout. Oh, he only went 7 innings and only threw 100 pitches. It might have been right after he ran into Marcus Giles. I don't know, but Simon homered in that game. He homered on the game September 6th in Milwaukee, which, to bring it full circle, is the place where he was, unfairly maligned for having a little fun as a member of the Pirates. And yeah, they swept Milwaukee, and they just, like you said, they had a hot September. And there we are.
Yeah, so Randall Simon with the Cubs.
Number of huge hits.
Played in 33 games. He had 6 homers and 21 RBIs as a part-time player. It was only 103 at bats.
Yeah, it was Karros' job, and he was only there 5 weeks.
That was pretty good. Interestingly, which Cub pitcher had the highest batting average?
And it wasn't Carlos?
It was not. He was close.
They could all hit. So was it Pryor or Wood?
It was Pryor.
No?
Pryor hit 250 with a 270 on base, 347 slug. He had a homer and 6 RBIs.
Well, you knew he threw a lot of innings
and Carlos hit 240 with a 250 on base and 387 slug. So Carlos had 40 points more slugging, so he out OPS'd him. But Carlos hit 2 homers and 6 RBIs.
Yeah, Pryor didn't hit any homers that year.
Wood hit 2 homers. Sean Estes hit a homer.
What?
Yeah.
I probably saw it. I don't remember it because I feel like I saw 800 of Sean Estes' starts.
We could probably spend an hour just on Sean Estes' home run.
We already covered his game, so we can skip over. It happened to be in the final week. When you get the picture, the Cubs are never far behind, never far ahead. And when that happens and you have 1 week to go, they're pretty much all important. So it was a huge game when Estes throws the shutout. Cubs still don't have the division clinched, and we already went over the clincher. They do. That's spoiler alert.
Sean Estes in June was a tough luck loser. He did it all against the Phillies. He pitched. He went 7 innings, but he gave up 4 runs. Struck out 7.
But
he got outdueled by the great Vicente Padilla.
Okay.
But with let's see, where is it?
And his flaring nostrils.
He homered off of Padilla in the. I guess he didn't really do it all in the 3rd with nobody on, but that was where his home run came from. Very exciting.
Before we go to the playoffs, can I ask you, remember what significant thing happened the day after the Cubs clinched the division on the final day of the season?
Kyle Farnsworth came on the field with a Bears jersey with number 44 on it because in Cincinnati, just a few weeks before, he had body slammed Paul Wilson. Okay, actually, the reason Kyle was on the field...
Another memory that happened in 2003.
Everything happened in 2003. We completely glossed over the fact that Dusty ended Pryor's career before we ever knew he did. When Pryor ran into Marcus Giles and Dusty, he held his shoulder. He was in horrible pain. His later in life, his orthopedist would claim that given the shoulder injury that he had, it was clearly caused by a collision.
Yep.
Dusty got him up on the mound and had him keep pitching. He was completely ineffective.
But he was awesome down the stretch.
Yes.
I'm not saying that just
it was the.
I think what happened was
the reason
his
career ended as early as it did was 2 things: Dusty's chronic overuse of him, but also the fact that he had a serious shoulder injury that they did not allow to heal. They kept pitching him through it because he could, and so he did.
Yes, beautiful. That's right. Both of those things happened in 2003.
Right.
Farnsworth
but the real reason, Farns was on the field was Ron Santo was out on the field pointing to his flag saying, "This is my Hall of Fame."
This is my Hall of Fame. Yes.
Got
yes.
him and Bruce Kim got good old number 10 retired. And sure, Leon Durham.
And Leon Durham.
And Luis Salazar and Lloyd McClendon.
A nice feel good, even if I could remove all tendencies I have for cynicism. A nice timely moment. It didn't interfere because the Cubs had clinched it. I'd be super annoyed if the Cubs needed to win that day. It was a beautiful, perfect thing. Everything kind of felt like it was lining up, and at this point, it was their first division title in 14 years because '98 had been a wild card season. We don't have a lot of experience with it. We still never win a series, so hey, let's go.
Well, they clinched the day before by sweeping the doubleheader and with Wes Obermuller winning for Milwaukee and Houston
and beating Ryan Vogelsong.
But what must have pissed John McDonough off was that was a straight doubleheader, one gate. 2 games for the price of 1, and you get to see the Cubs clinch a playoff spot.
An old-fashioned doubleheader. I was at a bachelor party that day that started with a golf outing, and it was a blast. The bachelor party was actually for a guy who would get married a couple weeks later, who was a diehard Sox fan, which I might come back to that if we don't approach a 3-hour mark here. But following the game on the radio and then catching part of it in the clubhouse, they clinched and won the division the same day. So if you were at Wrigley Field that day, I salute you. It's quite a moment.
So it's pretty ironic that the Cubs go to the playoffs. They get the mighty 103-win Braves. They're, they got to take on Chipper Jones and Mark DeRosa. All the greats. But, of course, the pitching staff of Smoltz, Glavine, and Maddox.
No Glavine. Remember, Cubs already pounded Glavine's ears back with the Mets this year. Glavine was gone. They did have Russ Ortiz, coincidentally, the guy from whose hand Dusty took the ball the previous October when he could have let him finish.
I think you'll agree. I probably shouldn't say that, but that series, Kerry Wood's finest moment as a Cub.
Beautiful.
He shoved in Game 1 and Game 5.
He shoved history up its ass is what he did.
And so the Cubs win their first postseason series since 1908.
Yep.
And that series is a complete afterthought. It was awesome. They did shit in that series that you never thought you would see the Cubs do.
Yep.
They go down there and they immediately take Game 1. Russ Ortiz is the Game 1 starter. Bobby Cox did that on purpose. He set his rotation up. They didn't clinch on the last day. They had clinched. And he decided Russ was his best option.
Was he just being cute? It was his first year without Glavine.
Well, that's right. Glavine was gone. I don't know. Well, Smoltz pitched Game 2 and Pryor pitched Game 3.
Against Maddox.
And he also had Mike Hampton because he pitched Game 5.
He was stacked. It seems like a cute move by Fox, by Cox, which.
Got so. Well, I won't want to say it.
I don't know. I don't know what he would have been thinking. Yeah, you're right. Because the Cubs almost didn't have a choice, like in 1998.
I think Russ won 18 games that year. I could probably look that up, but I didn't why bother.
No, it's
So he probably did it on purpose, and then he was going to have Maddox pitch Game 3 at Wrigley, and probably thought, that'll be fun when we sweep, and all the Cub fans can suck on it.
Yeah. Which would have been the second time that would have happened because Maddox beat them to close their playoff season. Not the last time they'd been in the playoffs. This is the second consecutive time the Cubs are playing the Braves in the playoffs.
But now the Cubs don't necessarily have their rotation in order because they didn't clinch till the second to last day. They do have Kerry going in Game 1, but they don't have Pryor until Game 3. And Pryor was their best pitcher. He's the guy who would have pitched Game 1 if they could have.
Yep.
But they didn't have bad choices because they had Karros pitch Game 2. Although
in retrospect,
he
Karlos
spent that game
giving up gas.
Spent that game backing up home a lot. He gave up 11 hits in 5 innings.
Yeah. Karlos, I think, Karlos was really the youngest. All eyes were on Pryor and Wood. Karlos had a really fine season. I think he was a little bit out of gas, though, in the playoffs. He didn't really do much memorable.
But even at that, so he gives up 11 hits, but he only gives up, 3 runs?
Yep.
So the Cubs are in it. And they actually tie the game in, when was that, the 8th? Yes. They tie the game in the 8th. They're down a run. Smoltz is still in. Ramos flies out. Karros singles. Doug Glanville runs for Karros. Randall Simon pinch hits. He singles. Now you got runners at first and third. Speedy Tom Goodwin hits into a double play. This had to be one where it was a sac fly double play. I don't remember this.
No.
He flies out to center, and then so who's running it? Let's see. So Glanville? How the hell did this happen? All right, I got to take a second here to figure this out. So we've got... Glanville pinch runs for Karros, and then Simon is on first base. So we get a double play. Simon is out 8-5-4. God knows what he was doing. But Glanville scored, so the Cubs have tied it. And we go to the bottom of the eighth, and we talk all the time about Dusty overusing his starters. Part of the reason he did was he didn't have much football then.
He didn't. In his defense.
Dave Veers is in. Yeah.
It's funny. I don't remember that game with those particulars that it was that close that late. Kind of in retrospect, it kind of just felt like that's a game they didn't win. I only wanted to mention also, back to that game one, it was actually, they were trailing in the sixth inning, 1-0, and tied it on a Gabor ground. And then you might remember, I'm sure you remember this, but that was the game which Wood in the sixth inning, which I forgot, hit a 2-run, basically game-winning double in the sixth.
Was so, and in that series, Fox kept showing his wife up in the box, and so we kept, and she was just like clapping, like right in front,
Right.
So we just kept typing wee. We'd be like, whatever his wife's name is.
Kind of became a thing.
What is this wife? Sarah. So we'd be like, Sarah Wood, wee, and then they literally said in the CS they would not show her because they got the Cubs complained.
Teased. Yeah. Well, but they're battling Atlanta, and it comes down to Friday night at Wrigley. And
we gotta close the circle here in game 2.
Oh, I'm
Veers
sorry.
comes in. The Cubs have just tied it. Everyone's very excited until he comes in, and he gets a quick out. The immortal Julio Franco, who at this point is in his mid-70s.
Correct. Yeah.
He grounds out, but then he walks Vinny Castilla.
Wow.
John Smoltz still pitching.
Vinny was with Atlanta. Still pitching.
Bats for himself.
Still batting for himself.
But because he's going to sacrifice bunt, he bunts. Pinch runner. Jesse Garcia goes to second. The Galaxy Brain Dusty intentionally walks Rafael Furcal to get to Mark DeRosa, and of course you don't pitch to Mark DeRosa in a big spot. DeRosa doubles. The pinch runner Garcia scores. Rafael Furcal scores. And now the Cubs are down 5-3, and John Smoltz trots out. He goes 1-2-3 in the ninth. And the series is tied.
You'll never see a game like that today. The fact that Smoltz stayed in for himself, the fact that he gave up 3 runs, is a 5-3 game. I don't.
Well, all right, we're giving him weight. Actually, this is terrible. He was their closer by then. Mike Hampton started.
Oh, duh.
Nah, that's my bad. I looked up and saw that he won.
Screwed that up.
So Hampton started. He pitched. He only gave up 2 runs in 6 innings. Ray King pitched to 1 batter.
Burger King. We talked about him. Wow.
Kevin Grabowski.
He
pitched an inning, and Smoltz. But they brought Smoltz in. Smoltz ended up blowing the save because with the double play. But then it still is a big deal. The Cox left him in. He bunted, and then he came back.
You could see the benefit of having a closer come in who's recently been a starter. They could handle the bat. So.
All right.
So that was the Hampton start. No, that's cool.
Right, I mean, but now we get to the long-awaited, much-anticipated Friday night at Wrigley.
Yep. So and kind of funny that in 2 consecutive playoff games, just happened to be 5 years apart. Greg Maddux starts for the Braves against the Cubs, having closed out the only game in the '98 LDS. Now after 5 long years, it's back, and former Cub Greg Maddux is back. This time he's facing Mark Pryor. Last time it was Kerry Wood, and this is maybe when you start feeling that our fortunes are changing.
Now the big difference between the Maddux start in '98 and in 2003 is that this time, while he's pitching to against a young Cubs ace, This time, the ace doesn't have a torn ulnar collateral ligament. He has a torn shoulder, but not an ulnar collateral ligament.
The fact that Wood went 5 innings in '98 just seems increasingly insane through the years.
So Greggy, who gets a lot of
we
shit.
had Pryor now. Now to put some balm on our wound, right? We had Pryor, so yeah.
Greggy gets a lot of undeserved shit for not being a good postseason pitcher. He had some well-documented not good games, like
correct
one in Philly for the Braves and then one we all remember for the Cubs against the Giants. But his numbers, when you look at him in the postseason, they're pretty damn good.
They even out.
He goes 6 innings. He only gives up 2 runs. But the problem is Mark Pryor is having none of it. He goes the route. He only gives up 2 hits. He allows 1 run, strikes out 7, and the Cubs have the lead, and they can win the series, their first postseason series in 95 years.
That's it.
The next night
at Wrigley Field.
And they're sending Matt Clement to the mound.
Yes.
Against Russ Ortiz.
Okay, so a little redemption Ortiz is hoping for. Everyone was amped up. And people Cubs, like our friend Chuck will get furious because the Cubs didn't win because I think he was there, but you know.
The Cubs take an early lead. In the 3rd, Moises doubles in Sammy, and they're up 1-0. So now you just need a shutdown inning from your boy Matt Clement, and you don't get it.
Yeah, Matt, I don't think he was always up for the moment, I feel.
In the top of the 4th, strikes out Andrew Jones, Julio Franco walks, Vinny Castilla singles, and then Darren Bragg drives in a run on a ground out.
With his annoying two Gs.
Yeah. He gives up 3 more in the 5th on a 2-run homer to Chipper Jones, as Sean Dunston always pronounced it like it was one word. Chipper Jones. And then Vinny Castilla drives in a run. And let's see. They end up going up. Let's see. The Cubs get a run back. Well, guess who pitched for the Braves in this one? One of the most handsome Cubs of all time. Do you remember Will Kinane?
I do. Didn't we talk about Will Kinane on this podcast? He looks like a serial killer or something?
Well, he looks just like the kid from Deliverance.
That's it.
Exactly.
No, we talked.
You put a banjo in Will Kinane's hands, and you've got him.
Yes, he's actually been brought up in that context. I love it.
But Will Kinane, in his 1 inning, pitching with a 4-run lead, gives up a home run to Eric Karros.
Oh, there's a feather in his cap.
And then the Cubs score again. They get another run off of Smoltz in the bottom of the 9th.
Okay.
Damian Miller
nail down another one.
Drives in Randall Simon.
All right, so they make it interesting. These are all close games, and I think also it's kind of wild to think about that. This, of course, is the closest the Cubs had been since 1984 of closing out a series, and the first time they were even in position to do so at Wrigley Field.
I distinctly remember feeling like they were screwed. Like
after they lost, right?
Yeah, you had to win that game at home. Now you've got to get on the plane. And I don't think there was even a day off. I think they just played the next night.
You are correct. They played.
You get on the plane, you go to Atlanta. The fucking Braves are going to shove it up your ass, and it's going to be like, oh, we were so close again. And at this point, then we were at the. Well, let's see. So it wasn't that much. They had lost their 3rd. That was their 3rd straight, 4th straight loss with a chance to win a series. They had lost all 3 in San Diego.
Just you wait a few weeks, right?
And it's like, shit.
Yeah, no. It crept in. Atlanta was royalty. We had your chance. We all felt it, even if we didn't want to say it. You were actually probably, in truth, trying to rally everybody saying this bullshit. They're going to win it, but of course, I don't think you wrote on the weekend. So this is between.
I would have done it during the playoffs, and I'm sure I was full of bullshit about. It's going to be fine, even though in reality, I'm like,
but it was.
It's going to be a disaster.
It's almost in some ways, honestly, I don't want to be dramatic here, but what they were to pull off the next day is almost as huge as what they pulled off in 2016. You could maybe even make the argument was huger. Just to close out a fucking series. It's the lowest of bars, but that built up on them as much as the series did, I think.
Well, one of the things they did in this entire playoff run, which what good teams do, is they tended to score first. And
it seems that way.
And it was a big deal in Game 5 because Kenny Lofton doubled to start the game, and then Moises drives him in. And so now, even before Kerry gets to the mound, he's got a lead.
Yeah.
And Kerry was more than up to the task on that day. In
feeling
fact,
it.
they added another run. Alex Gonzalez had a home run in the second, so he's up 2-0. And it stayed that way until the 6th, when Aramis made it 4-0 with a 2-run homer. So
feeling it. Still, things can go sideways. You got to consider the psyche of the Cubs fan at this point in time.
Yeah. Kerry gave one back in the 6th, but it was on a ground out. So Sheffield drove in a run, but with an out.
Yep.
There wasn't anybody left on base after that. And it goes 4-1 all the way to the top of the 9th when the handsome Will Canane comes back in, and he gives up another run. In fact, he gives up 2. Tom Goodwin doubles, and Eric Karros and Alex Gonzalez both score. The Cubs are up. No, he gives up. Wait a minute.
No, just
Gonzalez goes there. Just Karros scored. So it's
Yep.
5-1. And then Dusty feels like at that point it's safe to give the ball to Sweaty Joe.
Yep. Yeah, he did it. Like we saw it happen, and we're probably at various
and
stages
Joe,
of excitement.
not only does he do it, he comes in and he faces Chipper Jones, Javi Lopez, and Andrew Jones.
Perennial all-stars,
And
one Hall of Famer and an arguable second Hall of Famer.
And they go fly out, strike out swinging, strike out swinging.
Yeah. I mean, Andrew struck out a lot, so he set it up perfectly.
So in the Hall of Fame podcast, you remembered who had recorded the final out
Yep.
in 2008.
Orville Overall.
So it went from Orville Overall all the way to Joe Borowski.
Yes, it did.
Before another Cub would do that.
Just a series, which of course was the series till 1969, but now from 69 to 03, we're 34 years into multiple tiers. At some point, the law of averages would seem to dictate that you'd win one. But of course, this is only the 4th time that the Cubs have made the playoffs, but it had some serious heartache. Really had to scramble, really had to fight. But you know what? They had Kerry Wood, and you hit it on the head. I mean, this was really it for Kerry Wood, man. And should never be forgotten, obviously.
So I distinctly remember so the Giants had a really good record, but I distinctly remember at some
won
point
100 games.
Early in that series against the Marlins thinking we really need the Giants to win because the Marlins are good.
Maybe.
And it would be easier to beat the Giants even with their ridiculous record because the Marlins they were the wild card
in 97 and in 03. Yeah, season.
But when they fired Jeff Torborg during the season and brought in Jack McKeon,
70.
They may very well have had the best record in baseball from that point on. Like this was not the Cubs weren't running into it's the expansion team that won the World Series and then tore everything down. And this was a really good team. And they brought up Miguel Cabrera, which is ridiculous that he's still playing.
And ridiculous that he produced how he did for them.
Yeah.
He was like
young and skinny and athletic and
he played third base, I think. Dontrell, it's like in a flash. A lot of these young players sort of arrived before.
Yeah, and then the guy who doomed the Cubs ended up being Josh Beckett, who, while completely hungover, pitched a long time in Game 7.
It was Beckett's destiny, I think, in retrospect. But a lot happened to help get him there. Let's say.
So, Game 1 is. I mean, obviously, Game 6 is the one that got away because we saw it, but Game 1 was just...
It hurt
was
just
as bad a loss. Karros is pitching, although, as you said, we realize now that Karros was completely out of gas.
Yep.
But the Cubs score... The wind was... It was hot, and the wind was blowing out, even though it was October 7th. And Beckett was pitching for the Marlins. The Cubs jumped all over him.
He got lit up.
And they scored 4 runs in the first inning. Lofton walked, Grudzielanek tripled, Lofton scored. Obviously, hard not to score. Then Moises hit a homer, and then Alex Gonzalez drove in another run later in the inning. So now they're up 4-0, and you're thinking, all right, this is pretty good. And Karros...
That's kind of nuts.
Karros gets through the second without any issue. But in the third, Not so good. He gets Beckett out, but then the great Juan Pierre, who I'm sure spent pregame rolling his balls down the foul lines, as Len Casper liked to say that he did.
As was his wife,
He tripled.
Luis
Castillo walked. Pudge Rodriguez hits a 3-run homer. Now it's 4-3. Derek Lee strikes out, but then we get back-to-back homers from Miguel Cabrera and Juan Encarnacion. And so now the Cubs are losing 5-4. But this game would only get crazier.
It would swing. Wild swings.
Karros still pitching in the 6th. And it's a 1-run game. And he gives up this is excellent managing by Dusty here. A one-run lead. And Miguel Cabrera singles. Encarnacion singles. Then Karros throws a pass ball. Now there's runners in second and third. Conine comes up, hits a sac fly. Then Alex Gonzalez fouls out, and then Josh Beckett strikes out. You would think that at some point in there you take Karros out. But
I don't think that was the thinking at the time. Certainly not with Dusty. But
no, not with Dusty.
I cheated and look. Karros only threw 101 pitches in the whole outing. I mean,
well, it was
9 hits and 6 innings. He probably should have been taken out just because he was getting hit. But he just had that one bad inning, really. I seem to remember. Just felt like he was giving up lasers.
Yeah.
But
Alex Gonzalez, it's a 2-run homer in the 6th, and he ties the game. And now Dusty's like, okay, so he goes to Remlinger because we got lefties coming up. He gets Pierre out.
Even though.
But Castillo singles. Now the righties are coming up, so you got to get Remlinger out and go with the Farns. But it works. And he strikes out Pudge and Lee.
I should add that the Farns had a hell of a year in 03. He was like the Steve Traxel of relievers, and it just happened to fall in his good year. So
we're tied at 6 in the 9th, and Dusty, actually, he does the right thing, goes to the closer, because why? You're at home. Once you get to the 9th, if you score, you win, so you might as well use your closer. But with 1 out, Todd Hollandsworth doubles. Juan Pierre walks. There's an error on...
Curse him.
Grzelcyk? Is he just playing second?
I would have to assume so. There's no reason to take him out.
Yeah, it's still Grzelcyk. Error on Grzelcyk. Worst error of the whole series. Well, maybe not.
Yeah, it's slipping away. Worst error.
So then Pudge singles. He drives in 2 runs. He drives in Hollandsworth and Juan Pierre. And so now the Marlins are going to go to Yugi Urbina. And this was a big deal because the Cubs had been trying to shore up their bullpen at the trade deadline, and they kept being rumored that they were going to trade for Urbina, who he may have even been a waiver trade. I don't even know if he got traded at the deadline.
Well, he was kind of a top reliever, right, for a couple of years around this time.
He did that weird thing on the mound where he would pull his sleeves up so you could see his guns, and
then he would also swing machetes at people.
Yeah, and then he would kill people on his property with a machete.
He was a badass.
So he comes in and he's gonna nail things down. The Cubs are gonna be down 1-0, and so he gets Damian Miller, but Lofton doubles, Grzelcyk grounds out, and then with 2 outs, down 2 in the bottom of the 9th.
It's a capstone to his career. Probably one of the single most astonishing home runs in Wrigley Field history. No offense to Gabby Hartnett.
And there's great
whatever. So much great footage.
So Santo, even though he retired his number on the last day, is back in the hospital. I don't know if it was his bladder cancer. It was something bad.
He had so little faith in the Cubs that he was not scheduled to be in the booth. Steve Stone.
Steve Stone is filling in, and there's great. I know I can find the call because it's easy to find. There's a great call for Pat Hughes and Steve Stone. And basically, Steve, who I give a lot of shit because he always predicted the same thing, was if
slider
0-2 or 1-2, a slider in the dirt, and then act like a genius when it happens because they pitchers throw it all the time.
You talk enough, you'll make some good observations.
But he basically says, and maybe he says it after. I think he says it before.
He does.
Urbina throws the fastball right by Sammy, and then he throws him a slider, and Sammy hits it
He crushes
500 feet to left field to tie the game, and Wrigley just goes completely
It's so
nuts.
insane. It's like old Wrigley Field. The bleachers aren't so huge, and beginning with that home run chase that we talked about in '98, like sometimes you would see a sea of people, and it was more intensified in 2003. Frankly, kind of idiotic. I mean, if you want to see the game, especially in 2003,
stand out on the street.
You don't have a phone that you can look at it on, unless you got like a Sony, Watchman. But it was a sea. It was like it was so deep. It was from the wall all the way to the sidewalk across the street on Sheffield. Or, I'm sorry, on Waveland, and Sosa just buries that pitch from Urbina into that crowd outside the ballpark.
Stone is incredulous that he would throw a slider to a guy who was that late on your fastball. He's not wrong. But that you're right. Those scenes were crazy. And then whenever anything would happen, you would just see like cups flying in the air and beers going everywhere.
Yeah.
And this, of course, is from the fan base that, as Chris Russo correctly pointed out, never booed Javi because Cub fans just don't really care.
Right.
Yeah.
Even though he got booed for getting doubled off this season.
Yes, that's right.
With one out. So I was at the game the next. Or they lose. So let's finish the game here.
Yeah, because it gets there's a tragic thing that happens.
There is.
Here.
Sammy pulls the Cubs fat out of the fire with of all the incredible home runs he's hit.
Right. And then
tops the list.
So Dusty leaves Joe in to pitch the 10th, and he goes 1-2-3 through the Marlins. So now the Cubs are up with a chance to walk it off, take a 1-0 lead in the series, and they have Aramis, Randall Simon, and Alex Gonzalez coming up, and Oogie stays in. And nothing happens. Aramis flies out. Simon and Gonzalez both strike out swinging. So now we get to the 11th, and the pitcher spot is due up. And Dusty goes to lefty Mark Guthrie because he's afraid that he's sure they're going to go with Lenny Harris, and he wants to have a lefty to pitch to Lenny.
Well, and they
on
Lenny
the
up.
bench was one of the Marlins' best players, Mike Lowell, who'd been hurt but was now back and had lost his third base spot at least for the playoffs to Miguel Cabrera. So he comes up to hit, and now he's facing Mark Guthrie, and he hits a fucking home run.
He hit it into the basket, but he hit it out nonetheless.
And now I don't know. Maybe the alternative would have been he had to go to El Pulpo after that. Maybe that's who would have started it, and he did not. He didn't cloak himself in brilliance, but he got out of it. He gave up a single to Castillo. They walked. Castillo stole. Pudge came in, or they intentionally walked Pudge. Then Lee walked to load the bases, and Cabrera lined into a double play.
Yeah, they got out of it, and that was it. And then, but frustrating. Just
so in the 11th, the Cubs. I don't know how they didn't mount a rally with this group coming up in the 11th with Braden Looper pitching for the Marlins. Ramon Martinez and Damian Miller make outs, and then Kenny grounded out with 2 outs in the 11th. So now the Cubs are down 1-0. And if you think that one's frustrating, the next game is even more frustrating.
Let me take this
for the dumbest possible reason.
2 things. First of all, I went to this game, and I did not go to any of the Braves games because I was out of town, and the only other playoff game I had been was the Maddox Wood game in '98. So I'm 0-1, and in this game, the Cubs actually rocked the shit out of, I think Brad Penny was the starter.
Alyssa Milano's boyfriend at the time.
So in consecutive at-bats, Sosa hits the most iconic homer that he's ever hit the day before. First time up in this one, he hits, I think, what might arguably be the longest home run he ever hit, that nearly, and this might be harder to find on YouTube, but I feel like it almost hit the camera in center field, which nobody's ever done. So it shows you just what on a roll fucking Sosa was, even though he was, kind of reaching the end. Really had a flair for the dramatic. But they jump out on Penny in the first, and it's, they roll, right? I mean, the game it's a laugher. We know this even with all of our fear of jinxing the Cubs. I don't know if Sammy hit his homer in the first or early in the game.
Hit in the second.
It was in the second.
Well, because he walked in the first and he got to bat twice in the first.
Yes,
time.
in the 2. So.
Yeah. Well, the Cubs score 2 in the first, 3 in the second, 3 in the third, and 3 in the fifth.
So 11. So it's 11.
11-0 in the fifth.
11-0 after 5 full innings. Don't know what Mark Prior's pitch count was at 5 innings. Doesn't matter. I will say, though, that Dusty trotted him out 2 more innings.
Yep.
It took the Cubs scoring maybe another run in the in the sixth, after he did give up some runs. I guess, that maybe Dusty finally got alarmed. Cubs got one back, but even after that, he pitches the 7th inning.
Well,
insane. 116 pitches.
With the Cubs up 11-0 in the 6th, he leaves Pryor in, and Pryor gives up back-to-back homers to start the inning to Lee and Cabrera.
In the 6th.
Yep. In the 6th. And Pryor finishes the inning.
And the Cubs get another run.
Back. Yep. Then Alex Gonzalez hits another home run.
Wow, Gonzo is going off.
Yeah, had the Cubs hung on, it was going to be the decision for NLCS MVP was either going to be Sammy or Alex Gonzalez.
Yeah, they would have given it to Sammy, but Alex is making an argument in the first 2 games.
And Kenny had a really good series too. But I think we at the time, because we were predicting it, because they were cruising to the win in Game 6.
Well,
it was going to be
Sammy.
Yeah,
that's right.
Then Pryor has to come back out for the 7th for some unknown reason, and he makes he throws 10 more unnecessary pitches, but he goes 1, 2, 3 through Mike Mordecai, Juan Pierre, and Luis Castillo.
Thank Christ, he could have been up to 130 in this game. The game was a laugher.
Yeah, so the Cubs win that one 12-3, and a game where a savvy manager takes his ace out after 5.
Preserve his resources.
It says we know we're most likely gonna have to get. Well, they're up 2-1. No, it's 1-1. You know you're gonna have to pitch him again. He's absolutely gonna pitch again in the series. So you sit him like, all right, we'll save some bullets for your next start.
Yeah, he could have been out of that game at like 80 pitches.
But not the dust bag.
Yeah, he's already pitched way more than he's ever pitched ever. By far. I mean, the year before when he got called up, he pulled a hammy or something and didn't even pitch in September.
Yep.
He was beyond his reach, and
and when he had gotten drafted, he didn't pitch at all because they felt like he had already met his workload at USC.
Yep.
So he only pitched part of 02 in the minors.
He may have done some rookie ball, maybe not even did that. Yeah, 02, and then he got called up and then didn't even pitch September. So here, we're a year later, and he's like a thoroughbred that's just got the slash marks from the whip.
I'll link to this because it's a free post on Pointless Exercise.
And of course, linking to Sammy's homer off of Urbina in Game 1, although he's probably done it multiple times already, is probably a must.
Well, so NLCS Game 3 in 2003 is one of
epic.
It's one of the coolest games in Cup history, and so I did I went back and rewatched it during the pandemic and did a blow-by-blow rewatch of it. So that's the thing that I will link to. But it's the game when I think for the first time most of us were convinced that they were actually going to go to the World Series because they won 100%. A game that they never would have won before.
100%.
It was the sign that we were all looking for.
Turned a corner.
Because they get the lead, they blow the lead twice,
but not without another weird play to end it that felt like in the midst of it was another thing.
So this is
it's a Kerry Wood game.
Kerry Wood game. He goes 6 2/3. He gives up 7 hits, but only 3 runs. He leaves with the lead, and Sweaty Joe is in trust. Farnes goes to the scoreless inning, and then Sweaty Joe comes in to get the save, and Sweaty Joe blows the save. And Sweaty Joe really had a good playoffs.
He was due to blow one. I remember thinking that. Yep.
But then he he girds up his loins, and he gets a lot of huge outs after he blows the save.
That's right.
Because this is actually kind of ridiculous. He actually, so in the 8th, he blows the lead. He blows the lead in the 8th, and it's mostly Farnes' fault.
Yep.
The Cubs are up 4-3 in the bottom of the 8th, and they're just trying to go Farnsworth through the 8th to go to Joe in the 9th. Farnsworth gives up a single to Cabrera. Mordecai bunts him up to second. I guess it's not that much his fault. Konine makes an out.
No, he didn't walk anybody.
Then Dusty goes with Hollinsworth coming up. Dusty goes to Joe. I don't know why.
Yeah.
But who was
fucking Hollinsworth? Hollinsworth or Hollinsworth pinch hit. Alex
Seabass
Gonzalez,
was supposed to be
Seabass, the other Alex Gonzalez. That's right. That's right, kids. There were 2 Alex Gonzalez's playing shortstop in this series.
So Holly gets a single to tie the game, and now we're all depressed. But it's tied. The Cubs come up in the 9th with a chance to take the lead, and Oogie's in again, and here's Oogie and Sammy, and then this time Sammy strikes out.
Yeah.
Cubs go down 1-2-3. So the bottom of the 9th, Joe is back out there, and things don't start well for him. He gives up a single to Juan Pierre. Luis Castillo bunts him to second because nothing Dusty and Jack McKeon like more than giving away outs.
A lot of coaches back then.
Actually, the bunt was really stupid because then it freed up first base, and the Cubs walked the super hot Rodriguez.
He was, and Rodriguez probably was MVP. I don't remember, but I just remember he was beating us over the head all series. So yeah, it was welcome. And similarly, Derek Lee was struggling till the very end.
And Lee flies out with runners at first and second and 2 outs. Two outs. Juan Pierre steals third. Then Joe walks Cabrera. So now the bases are loaded. But Mike Mordecai's up, and he flies out. So we go to the bottom of the 10th. And the Cubs have, listen to this. I don't know how Oogie didn't give up multiple runs to Ramon Martinez, Alex Gonzalez, and Paul Bako.
Oh, bunch of dusty guys.
Nice job. So we're down to the 10th. Who's pitching for the Cubs? It's still Joe.
God bless him. He blew the save, but he's girding his loins.
He gets Conine out, but then Dusty shits his pants.
And of course, we're Cub fans, right? Like you said, this is the game where we turn the corner. But at this moment in time, we are absolutely exhausted because every moment we're expecting it to just finish. I was at the Wild Goose on Lincoln Avenue with my former boss. I remember watching this game, and it was agony at this point that you're going through here because especially they're on the road, the game can end at any moment. We lived through Steve Garvey. It's like,
well, and we knew how it was going to end because after Conine made the first out, Dusty knew how it was going to end. We knew how it was going to end. Lenny Harris pinch hit for Oogie Urbina.
That's what you were saying earlier.
And here comes the walk-off homer, and instead he grounds out to second base.
That's the first indication that maybe things will be different. And we did just win a series, in Atlanta, so we're starting to feel a little bit better.
So now we go to the top of the 11th, and Randall Simon, who had I gave him short shrift. Randall had homered to tie the game, or maybe he even put him up. It was one of the. It was.
Might have been a lead changing go ahead. I think it was in the 8th, top of the 8th.
Yeah, it was a clutch home run, one of the biggest home runs in club playoff history.
It turned the game around. The Cubs are losing in the top of the 8th, and Randall hits a 2-run bomb. Yep. Suddenly they take the lead. That was the lead that Borowski.
Oh, because we had this craziness. We need to talk about this too. So, future Cub Chad Fox, who Dusty ended his career by overpitching him with a bad elbow. I was going to end.
He still came back.
Yeah. With 1 out, Tom Goodwin pinch hit, and he hit a triple. And then Randall Simon hit a home run that gave the Cubs the lead. It was very exciting. I can still picture it because I just watched it last year.
It was another all of his
a towering shot down the right field line.
Yes.
So the Cubs have 1 pinch hit triple in the game, which is pretty rare. We go to the top of the 11th. It's still tied, and Michael Tejera is going to pitch for the Marlins. They're running out of pitchers. Simon comes up. Here you go. He can hit another home run, but he doesn't. He lines out. But then
a little bit on top of it.
Lofton singles, and Doug Glanville pinch hits. And what does Doug Glanville do? He hits a pinch hit triple. The Cubs had 2 in the same game.
And Glanville's triple was sort of unique in that it was well struck, but basically just over the shortstop's reach, and somehow managed to skip past the left and center fielders, allowing Lofton to come around.
Right. So the Cubs have taken the lead, and he's at third with 1 out, and you got Sammy, Moises, and Aramis coming up. So surely good things are going to happen. He doesn't score. They leave him at third. Sammy intentionally walked, and Moises and Aramis both pop out to the infield. So now we're in the 11th, and Mike Remlinger is like the only dude left in the bullpen, maybe Dave Veers too. And so he's coming in.
Mark Guthrie could be there.
And remember, we're Cub fans, so we're just waiting for the other shoe to drop.
We're not through the wood. Our mindset at this point in time is how are we going to get kicked in the nuts here?
Slappy Juan Pierre leads off, but he grounds out to short, so there's 1 out. And then Remlinger strikes out Luis Castillo. So this is great, except Gabor can't handle the ball. And so Castillo reaches on a strikeout. And now he's at first base, and this is going to be bad. Pudge grounds back to Remlinger, who thinks about going to second, but probably wisely doesn't because Castillo is running. So now there's a runner at second.
Tying run.
And 2 outs, and Derek Lee is coming up. And this is the sign we've all been waiting for.
Yep.
He hits the ball to Aramis.
Future teammate very soon.
Who makes a complete mess out of it.
Yep.
And so we're going to have runners at first and third and 2 outs, except for some reason, after Aramis bobbles it.
Or first and second, yeah.
Yeah, I guess if he could have. Well, he was at second. So he should have gone to third.
He wasn't going to advance because it was hit to Aramis, right?
Oh, you're right. He's just froze. Aramis bobbles it.
Or did he? Yeah.
And how does it end up?
Well, he bobbles. What happens is that he goofs the play, but somehow Castillo wanders too far off.
Yeah, but second. Because I just watched this damn thing last year, and I don't remember exactly why this happens. And what's screwing me up is he didn't throw to first; he threw to second.
Yeah,
Castillo is out 5-4 to 5 to end the game.
Because he muffed the play.
Right, but did he throw behind Castillo?
That's what I believe is what happened. I'm almost positive that's how it happened.
But anyway, so the Cubs get the gift final out of the game with Luis Castillo running because he's out by 30 feet when he runs to third base.
Yeah, there's a rundown, so of course you still have to sweat it, right? Like, hey, how they're gonna,
Maybe that's all that happened. He was coming to third. Aramis didn't throw to first. Now Castillo's like, oh shit, and he tries to go back to second. They throw to second. He comes back to third, and that's when Aramis tags him out.
That is definitively what sort of made us all feel that we had turned the corner. Honest to God. That's the game that we should not have won, I felt like.
Right. So the Cubs are up 2-1 in the series. And now we've got...
Can I just tell a quick personal story about the next night, just for the record? I know we're probably over 2 hours at this point, but I think we expected to for when we pull up a season like this. But just going to say, I mentioned earlier that when the Cubs clinched the division, I was at a bachelor party on a golf course with a guy who was a Sox fan. The Saturday night game, Game 4, was the night of the wedding, and we played softball. He was actually a friend of my brother's, but I knew him well. We played softball together. We're at this wedding, and the Cubs game is going on. Now, this guy's a diehard Sox fan, like you and I are Cubs fans. Like, hates the Cubs, and this and that. This is before the Sox have won the World Series too, which is an important point because he was the one guy that would always tell me after having beers after softball, he'd say, I don't care if the Cubs ever win it, they just can't win it before the Sox. But this is before 2005. He marries a girl, I think she was from Schiller Park, family, not just like passive Cub fans, but diehard Cub fans. So Mark's family, Mark's a Sox fan. His dad, who we know well, diehard old school Sox fan. Half the wedding Sox fans. The other half, as it turns out, the bride's family, they're Cubs fans. Okay, just throwing that out there. We're at the wedding. One of the guys in our party, it was 2003, a little bit harder to access media. You don't want to be rude, hang out at the bar. He looked like an FBI guy. He's got the game on his ear, and we're getting updates. And then he tells us, because this is what happened in the first inning in Game 4. Former Cub Dontrell Willis, who was on fire, is pitching against the Cubs, and our guy Aramis hits a first inning grand slam, and we're excited about it. But the wedding goes on, things continue. We're sitting at our table, and the DJ would periodically provide updates. And so obviously there are Sox fans in attendance because the groom's family are Sox fans. So they're booing, but we're, at the table and enjoying it. And we're whooping it up because again, the bride happens to be a family of Cubs fans, and I'm a Cubs fan. My brother's a Cubs fan. So we're enjoying the shit out of this. This groom has to eat shit. So the game ends. For those of you at home, spoiler alert, Cubs do win this game. We could break it down. Just wanted to share this, that at the end, when the DJ or the MC announced that the game was over, the Cubs, we knew that the game was over. The Cubs won it going away. Aramis hits the grand slam in the first inning, for Christ's sake. After informing us of the whim, actually plays "Go Cubs Go." So it was beautiful shit sandwich that Mark had to eat. That at his own wedding, he had to listen to a room full of people say "Go Cubs Go." I'm going to just put an end to this long-winded story and say that later at that evening, we walk up to the groom's dad, and he just sticks out his hand to my brother and I. He goes, "Congratulations." And we both of us instinctively, like, no. It took us 19 years just to get to this point. Okay. In 1984, the Cubs, of course, were up 2 games, only had to win 1 with 3 chances to do it, and didn't pull it off. So it took us 19 years just to get to that point. We were not assuming it was over. We were having fun. We were enjoying it. The Cubs are up. Deep down, we probably felt they were going to do it, but we were not about to accept any kudos because they had to do it. Deep down, though, we're like, they got this. So there you go. I may have talked all over Game 4. We don't have details. They won it in the first inning.
It was a matchup of that was the trade, Matt Clement against Dontrell, and the Cubs jumped all over Dontrell. That not only did Aramis hit the grand slam, but he came back in the 3rd and he drove in another run, and they were up 6-0 after 3. They were up 7-0 after 4. Rick Helling was in pitching for the Marlins.
Home run Helling.
They ended up Clement pitched really well. Went 7 2/3. Only gave up 3 runs. 2.
Okay. He had a nice lead. Didn't have to look over his shoulder to the bullpen.
Yeah, he had 3 runs. The Farns pitched the last inning in the 3rd. And so now the Cubs were all set up the next day with the Game 1 matchup again. It was going to be Josh Beckett and Carlos Zambrano, and the Cubs win, and they have an extra passenger on the plane back to Chicago. It would be the NL, whatever the name of the trophy is.
Oh, I thought you were going to say Tom Dreesen.
And Tom Dreesen. The problem was Carlos pitched really well. But the Cubs,
he did.
He didn't pitch as well as Josh Beckett. Beckett
it was
threw
a close game.
11 strikeout, 2-hitter.
Yeah, it was. He was beginning his streak.
So as poorly as he had pitched in Game 1, and Carlos rebounded. Carlos only went 5 innings. He gave up 2 runs, struck out 5. He'd walked 4. He didn't pitch
some
great.
redemption.
He was in trouble. Dave Veers gave up a run because that's what he did. Reminger gave up a run. Alfonseca didn't.
Yep.
But the Cubs lost 4-0.
Yeah, and without being cocky, it felt like a game that they could absorb.
Yeah, because now you're gonna go home, you're gonna have a day off, and then you're gonna have Mark Pryor and Kerry Wood pitching.
So
with it. Either one wins, and you go to the World Series.
Just to bring it one more time to 84, I'm going to bring this up again when we talk about 1984, but you'll recall that 1984, the season in which the Cubs did have 3 chances to win 1 game. Their last chance came down to Rick Sutcliffe, who was 16-1, 17-1 if you count his Game 1 victory. Had won 14 consecutive decisions, would have been 15. And I just remember when Garvey hit the homer, my brother just saying, all this means is that Steve Trout's going to pitch the first game of the World Series. Well, similarly, I want to say that in 2003, Mark Pryor and Kerry Wood had either lost back-to-back 1 time in successive starts or 0 times. It's one of those 2. I can't remember precisely. And so it was like, felt like the same thing, really, in a sense, as 84. It's like, all right, well, we lost 1, but a little bit different because they had 2 games to do it. But again, you had Pryor, you had Wood.
So, not to derail this to 84, but just a quick story. At a Cub convention, you go around and they'll have some of the marquee guys, they would have like a autograph raffle. And you'd get a ticket and you could go get in line and get. My dad got he got a ticket and that's how I have Carlos's autograph. Dad stood in line and got Carlos's autograph.
Sweet.
So for other guys, you didn't need them. And so we were walking through the thing, and they had some 84 Cubs up on the thing. You could just walk up. The line wasn't too long. And the first guy in line was Jim Fry. And so I had a baseball, and I handed it to him. And just because I'm an asshole, I said, well, we'll get him in Game 6. And that was a reference to the fact that he famously didn't pitch Sutcliffe in Game 4 when he could have gone for the jugular in Game 4. subsequent to that, me and my little smart-ass remark to Jim Frey, who didn't give a shit because he's like probably didn't hear me. If he did, he's like, fuck that kid, I don't care. Plus, he still had those weird transition glasses that had turned into sunglasses, even though he was inside. I'm sure he had his little blue tennis shoes on that he would wear.
His comb over.
I did a rewatch for DeCipio. I did a game, I did a game breakdown of it. I had never watched Game 5 since I was a kid. And I watched it again, and I went through it, and there's no way Sutcliffe would have pitched well in Game 4.
He was probably gassed.
He was, and although Game 4 was a night game, Game 5 was a day game.
Yeah, so not a huge difference in time.
But
12 hours.
Well, a huge difference in sunny and heat, because Sutcliffe, especially with the stupid beard and the big poofy hair, and he was a little doughy, he was melting down on the mound. He was exhausted. And he pitched pretty well. I mean, he'll give 3 runs.
5 innings, yeah.
But I watched the game. I changed my mind watching. I'm like, he should not have pitched Game 4.
Yeah, Sanderson had to man up and do better. And
I don't think it was a matter of, because that was always the thing, right? They were saving him to pitch Game 1 of the World Series. They weren't. They really just, they had him in reserve if they needed Game 5, which they hope they didn't need. But I don't think it would have gone well had they pitched him in Game 4.
Well, I'm glad you revisited it. I mean, that's fair. I think if you flash forward to 2003, it's almost similar, where like you're running out of gas with Pryor just to get to the series.
And so the problem we have with it is that he's pitching on normal rest, but he threw 35 extra pitches in Game 2 that he shouldn't have, because with an 11-run lead, they were still pitching him.
That's almost 3 innings sometimes if you're pitching well.
But, so it's one of the most exciting days in Cub history. You're all excited. It's
Mark Pryor
is so good.
First time in our lifetime that the Cubs are in a position to clinch a pennant at Wrigley Field. The fact that day existed was singular and unprecedented.
He was going up against Carl Pavano, and we're like, oh, we can handle Carl Pavano. That won't be an issue.
Yeah. Marlins are scrambling already. They already used Beckett again.
And he mostly cruises through the first 7 innings. He's got a 3-0 lead. The Cubs got 2 off Pavano, and I remember they because Dontrell hadn't pitched very much because they knocked him out.
Relief.
He came in relief and gave up another run. I think it was a wild pitch. Sammy.
I'm telling you.
And so you're like, all right, now that was the extra run we needed. Now it's a 3-run lead.
That's the point.
Can't blow it now.
Yeah, just to go one more anecdote, Andy. I have to cram this in because it's my only chance, but I forced my dad to go to this game instead of me in some stupid feudal gesture, some sentimental act. And my dad did not even want to go. He was like, you're younger, you'll remember it more. These are my tickets. My brother was going, and I'm like, I'm going to force my dad to go. Even my mom was like, he doesn't want to go. And I was like, I was just being very sort of, obvious with this sentimental gesture. Like, my dad's born in 33, barely remembers 45. He wasn't in the park. They're going to clinch the pennant. You got to go. And he was reluctant, and I really wanted him to go. I just genuinely, I'm like, I will get my chances. I think I may have killed him. He's still alive, fortunately. I shouldn't say that, but he just turned 70. My dad, the same guy who I've said before, once sent me to my room for jinxing the White Sox into a win. Went at one point during this game when that wild pitch happened, he did turn to my cousin Tom, who he had been going to games with since the 60s and Bears games. And he said, Tom, I can smell it. This is kind of a family lore. Yeah, who knew he was smelling death?
So actually, we were right, but we were wrong. So they had a 1-0 lead going in the bottom of the 6th with Pavano still pitching. Dontrell came in to pitch to Karros with Sandy.
It was Grudzielanek who scored the 3rd run, right?
And so that wild pitch was the 2nd run. And then an inning in the 7th, Grudzielanek drove in Paul Bako.
That's the one. I'm sorry. It was when it went up 3-0, and not just my dad in the stands. I think everybody.
Well, especially when Paul Bako scored. You're like, all right, this won't be a problem.
It's like it should be a holiday.
So, at least twice earlier in the season, once it happened to Bako, where he went for a foul ball
in the series in Game 2.
Okay, yeah. Game. But it also had happened earlier in the season with somebody else where a fan.
I pulled it up.
where a fan had knocked a ball away from a Cub because they couldn't resist themselves. And then you're right. Earlier, he was over by where the screen used to end.
Similar.
And some asshole knocked the ball away from him.
The date is May 3rd, 2003, way back in May. Now, at one point when I was writing, I was able to pull a Paul Sullivan article like 5 years after the fact in 2008 that had the details about some stockbroker looking asshole in the front row on May 3rd, 2003, that messed with the ball in the top of the 8th inning when the Cubs blew a one-run lead and lost the game. And I didn't have cable. It was the year after we got married. We had cut it. We were saving money. I remember just cleaning the house, listening to the game on the radio, and how irritated Pat Hughes and really Santo, of course, was at this fan on May 3rd who had reached out when Moises Alou was trying to catch the ball near the Cubs bullpen. And the Cubs lost the game, and whatever. But it was a story. It was in the news, and the guy didn't get kicked out because it's a meaningless regular season game. People saw pictures of him. Nothing more was made out of it. But it totally happened, and Moises Alou was the one that was going for the board. I only bring this up because some people, amidst what we're going to talk about, will try to somehow jump on Moises. And I was not a huge fan of Moises. I've had my shots at him. When we talk about 2002, we'll discuss when I heckled him raw because he had gotten off to such a horrible start. But in fairness to him, he experienced that, and the Cubs lost the game as the result in the top of the 8th inning. We already talked about the fact that the Cubs clinched the division on the second to last day of the season. So it's almost possible that this game could have cost them and nobody would have known about it, is my point, I guess. And I wish more people knew about it because more people would be conscious of a reminder of when you go to a ball game and you're watching the best players in the world watch the greatest game in the world, that is what you're there to see. That would be the reminder that you are there distinctly for that one reason. And if you add, other levels like, being at the most important game in 58 years and perhaps seeing a ball in the air that's the 23rd out of that game, that you might have the presence of mind to think, well, maybe my team, which I'm paying good money to see in witness history, is going to catch.
You would think so.
You would think so.
So I assume... Well, the thing about this was the Cubs there'd been an off day the day before, so presumably the Cubs had a full bullpen. It could go to anybody, and anybody wasn't much. They really, if I'm Dusty, I was preferred is that Pryor just goes the whole way, but I would guess that it was.
You've got Borowski, Farnsworth, and Remlinger is all you pretty much have, right?
So you can cover when you get to the 8th with a 3-run lead. You should be able to piece this together, and not in the way that it fucking happened.
Joe had his big effort going 2 1/3 Friday night. Didn't need to pitch Saturday, Sunday, Monday. 3 days off.
Right. So he's ready to go.
It may have been unconventional thinking in 2003 to do that, right? The multi-innings shouldn't be, but it certainly was for Dusty.
So anyway, Pryor takes the mound. With a 3-run lead, the top of the 8th, he's got Mordecai, Pierre, and Castillo to start. And he gets Mordecai to fly out. And then he actually gets Juan Pierre to fly out. I don't want to litigate the whole fucking Bartman thing because it's stupid. Right. But the fact that there are people who are like, I don't know if he would have caught it. Moises absolutely was going to catch the ball. Because you could see where his glove was.
Right.
And if that ball doesn't get hit, he's out.
You're being disingenuous if you suggest otherwise.
Yeah, it's not, I think when people sit in the park now and look down to where it is, you look and think probably it's higher up than it was. And you're like, well, there's no way. But when you see the replay, Moises didn't have to jump very high to get to it. And he was right under the ball.
I also think that when people see what happened to Bartman, regardless of how they felt at the time, and a lot of them probably felt the same way, that they feel so bad about it that they go so far out of their way to excuse
to say, well, he wasn't going to catch it anyway. So lay off poor Stevie.
And Moises Alou would never be confused for a Gold Glove outfielder, but that was a play that you could just tell he had lined up.
So actually, so Mordecai flew out. So Pierre doubled.
Right, Pierre's
so
on base.
Second. Right,
There's
so
only
the runner
one
at
out.
second, and there's one out, and Castillo should be the second out with Juan either. Let's even say Juan advances to third because Moises is half in the stands.
If he's daring,
and he is, because the only thing he can do
out.
is run. But that doesn't matter.
Right.
There's 2 outs, there's a runner at third, you have a 3-run lead, you don't care. But
That's
instead, Castillo gets another shot. Now, there's a whole bunch of shit that goes wrong here in this moment. The first one is Bartman getting in the way. The second thing is the Cubs have a 22-year-old pitcher on the mound. And they just let him stand there.
Mm-hmm.
Larry Rothschild doesn't waddle out. Dusty doesn't come out just to kind of just reset shit and go, don't worry about that.
That's right. That's what
they just stand there and they just stare at him like, you figure it out. Like, and it's hard to describe it. Mark Prior never felt like a 22-year-old.
Of course,
like he was born 28 years old, and I do think they just forgot the fact that you have a fucking kid standing on the mound. He's really good, but Moises is pissed, and he was jumping up and down and stomping around, and the crowd has gone weird, and the game really needed just to be slowed down for a minute, and they didn't do it.
Yeah,
and then he walked Castillo. And now you've got the tying run is coming up, and it's
doing
Pudge.
So he threw a wild pitch, which allowed on the ball.
So now it's runners at first and third,
which doesn't matter. It's an insignificant run at third.
Yeah, it's the Greg Maddux thing where if you have a runner at third with nobody out, or with nobody or one out in your mind, that run scores. Don't worry about it. Just don't let it get worse than that. And as Greg says, sometimes you end up when you do that runner doesn't score.
Yeah.
But you get yourself in big trouble if your whole thing is to keep that runner at third from scoring. And then everything goes sideways.
Well, it's first and third when, I don't know who it was, it Derek Lee or, it was Ivan. It was Pudge who.
He singles.
Well, no, he singles to make it 3-1, so now it's first and second, right?
First and second, and then Cabrera comes up, and he hits the chopper to Gonzalez.
And the only other thing I'll say to people that are like, oh, fuck Alex Gonzalez, 2 things. First of all, he should have turned the double play, but he had to get 2 outs. Sometimes you can get a little panicky. Would have been nice if he only had to get 1 out.
Yeah.
Just get the lob it across the first base.
Yeah.
Okay.
You can almost guarantee the inning ends right there.
So let's and then the other one, and this is just an issue that I have about people that do go so far out of their way sometimes to excuse certain behavior. It's ridiculous what happened to Bartman. That goes without saying, right? But you can't go so far as to just like erase that what he did was it was thoughtless. You just don't do that, especially in that situation. You're a fan, like I said sarcastically earlier, you're there to watch the best players in the world play the best game. So why would you think to interfere with that, let alone the fact that you're about to see an insanely historic moment? But these people that will go to the ends of the earth to defend Bartman, well, then just take Alex Gonzalez there. Well, that's the asshole you should yell at. Like somehow they think they're taking the moral high ground by defending more, and they're just piling on another guy that just happens to be a multimillionaire ball player, but he's still the guy that you're directing the vitriol at. How is that any better? You don't want to blame, in that case, like, look, I'm a Leon Durham fan. I'm not even that. I'm sad that he fucked that up. I'm sad that Alex Gonzalez, it's a physical error. It wasn't, it happens. But, sometimes you make mental errors and they're a little bit more preventable. That's all.
And if it happens in May to some bro stockbroker, there's a decent chance he wasn't really paying that close attention to the situation, right? But when there's 1 out in the 8th inning of the game that can send you to the World Series, everybody in that park, even Cub fans, is actually hanging on every pitch. They know the situation.
You should be acting
It's not like you look up and like, holy shit, here comes the ball.
You should be acting like that any ball coming your way is a line drive coming at your skull, and just get the fuck out of the way. Just get the fuck out of the way. Don't think what you
right,
can
but this
bring
idea
home.
that, well, he looked up and saw the ball and your reaction is to try to catch it. I don't buy that when your team is 5 outs away from the World Series and your whole thing is I just want to see us get outs.
Right. I paid top dollar.
You're not surprised by the ball arriving your way because you're as locked in as you're ever going to be in your life at a baseball game.
But I want to move on because you are exactly right. there were so many then cascading subsequent events from that. So I'm not excusing that because it was a mental error by a fan. It was a mistake in judgment.
Right. But the Cubs could have. But that didn't have that should have been a holy shit. Do you remember when that guy almost fucked up the pennant? It shouldn't have been.
Brant Brown.
My God! Do you remember Steve Bartman?
He should have been the Brant Brown of fans.
Yes.
But instead, Dusty let Pryor get cold, who was already out of gas physically, probably emotionally. Goes out and gets him a little bit late. Farnsworth is not doing it, even to the point where there's a point in this game where it's still salvageable, right? They lose the lead. Future Cub Derek Lee gets the heartbreaking double that I believe ties the game up suddenly. Yes. And then what happens is, what kills me is that Mike Lola gets walked. The bases are loaded. There's one out. Conine hits a fly ball to right. All right. We've talked about Sammy and his shortcomings. And if this happens, you should recognize if this happens today, how ridiculous it is. Sammy catches the ball and tries to gun the runner out at home. Sammy doesn't have the arm that he had 10 years earlier.
And even when he had the arm 10 years earlier, he wouldn't have thrown him out. He would have thrown the ball halfway up the screen, though.
Exactly. But by doing so, he gets Mike Lowell in the piano that's on his back to tag up and go to second base, leaving first base open, after which they intentionally walk Todd Hollandsworth. Yeah. And again, Farnsworth can't get a fucking out. Gives Mike Mordecai. Bounces one off. Now the game's over, But like they had a chance to redeem Bartman. They had a chance to redeem Gonzalez.
Well, yeah, because if you somehow keep it 4-3, or even 5-3,
you got 6 more outs.
You got 6 more outs, and you've got Oogie, who you have hit. You've scored off of him twice already in the 6 games, 5 games before that.
Yeah,
but now you're down. It gets so ridiculous.
Well, the game ended that inning. Yeah,
they gave up 8 runs on 5 hits in an inning.
Yeah, and of course the fans got over obsessed because my dad and my cousin, they were just like everyone's chanting asshole, and that got out of hand.
Yeah, but it had to come get him and haul him out.
It could have been nipped in the bud if Dusty kind of maybe helped get control on the field and help coax Pryor out of the inning. He didn't. He let Pryor get cold, and then Pryor was done, and then the game was done. And that's it.
And so then down 8-3, the Cubs go 1-2-3 in the 8th and 1-2-3 in the 9th.
Okay. But you still got another game.
Right. So now you have the biggest mulligan in Cub history. You still have a chance to go to the World Series, and you have Kerry Wood, who'd been your hero of the – he'd been put in the same situation in the NLDS.
Correct. He's going to do it.
Blew a chance to win the series, and they had to go to him, and he came through.
We were hoping he'd start game 1 of the series, but no, he's going to come out. And he did okay in game 3 in that crazy Friday night, but this is what it takes. We lived through that Friday night game, so let's.
So he's pitching, and it's Brad Penny it's Mark Redmond. Mark Redmond is pitching.
That's it. I mean, Florida's kind of out of starters at this point.
And so you're thinking, all right, good. We'll get to Redmond early, and we'll just take care of this. It'll be fine. Problem is, you got to get through the top of the first, and the game starts.
Wood was amped up.
The game starts triple, fly out, walk, homer.
Yep.
And it's 3-0 with 1 out.
The homer's by Cabrera, right? Who's just hit his. Yeah.
Right, the 24-year or 20 whatever he is, 20-year-old who's now hitting cleanup in the fucking in the NLCS.
Just in the nick of time, you fucker.
So now it's like, oh well, shit. Now we're screwed.
Yeah.
Except we get to the bottom of the second, it's still 3-0, and so we talked about how, and I mentioned this when I don't know if you. Don't watch it if you haven't watched it. So the Cubs did that stupid pat on the back thing about the renovations movie.
Yep. I read your recap.
And
I'm good.
Crane Kennedy gave an example of how structurally lousy Wrigley Field was towards the end before the renovations. Talks about how he was at a Jimmy Buffett concert and the fans were making the stands sway. Really, that's the fucking example you're going to use?
Right.
I mean, we saw it when Sammy hit the home run off
in game 1.
Oogie Urbina in game 1. And then what happens in the second inning of game
just almost
7,
incredible.
Right. Almost took the stadium down. So the Cubs are down 3-0, and with 1 out, Karros doubles, Gonzalez doubles, and then Damian Miller makes an out, but Kerry's up with 2 outs and 2 on, and he doesn't just hit a home run, he hits a bomb.
There's a shot.
And Wrigley goes absolutely apeshit. The game's tied, and it's like, okay, good. Now we got this. We'll Kerry hit the homer. We tied it up. He'd looked good in the top of the second. Everything's settled down. This is going to be great.
But we're only tied.
Right. He gets through the third, and then the Cubs actually take the lead.
Moises does exactly what Kerry does.
Moises hits a home run. Wrigley goes nuts, and it's 5-3. And now it's like, okay, well, we're going to take advantage of our extra chance.
This is where I'm going to introduce a name that will always haunt me, and it's Brian Banks, a longtime utility guy. Used to be with the Brewers, who I believe leads off, what is it?
The fifth.
The fifth inning. And the first chink in Kerry Wood's armor, as it turns out, at the most inopportune time. When he just loses his ability to throw strikes.
Walks Brian Banks on 5 pitches.
Yeah, after
he gets Pierre to fly out, but then he walks Castillo.
Yeah,
and now it's an all hands on deck Game 7.
Which you would think, right? But our guy Matt Clement, right? Isn't he involved in this?
Well, that was always the story that we've heard was that when Rothschild was talking to the starters about who would be available out of the bullpen, Clement said he wasn't comfortable pitching out of the bullpen. Yeah. And we don't know that to be 100% true. Incredible. But it's a story that we've heard because he would have been a guy you would have wanted to have pitched in this game.
I mean, because who comes into this game for Florida, by the way?
Yeah, it's coming up here. Is he already? Yeah, he's coming up after he walks Banks and he walks
2
Castillo.
days rest. And by the way, Clement's on 3 days rest. Really
and you're not asking him to start. You only want a couple innings out of it.
18 years later, that really, I guess the culture is more attuned to that now. It's a little bit maybe of an unusual move to do that with your number 4 starter. Why would you need him to come in?
Well, so 13 years later,
better than Dave Veers,
the Cubs almost pitched their entire starting staff in Game 7.
Exactly.
If they hadn't scored when Zobrist got the big hit, Jake was coming in, meaning that Hendricks.
1 day's rest. 1 day's rest. Not even.
Right. So,
yeah.
Hendricks, Lester, and Arrieta would have all pitched in Game 7.
Everybody but Laggy. Yeah, but Matt Clement on 3 days rest. Heaven forbid. Heaven forfend.
So, Pudge doubles to cut the lead to 1. Cabrera grounds out, and so he can still get out of it with the lead.
A future Cub.
But Derek Lee singles to score.
Yeah. Derek Lee's numbers are not good for this series, if I remember correctly. I could be wrong, but he.
Cabrera did drive in a run, so then Lee's run gave him the lead. The Marlins are up 6-5.
Yeah, Lee had big hits in the last couple games, obviously.
And so in comes Josh Beckett, who intrepid readers had seen celebrating the Game 6 win to the early hours of whatever day that was.
Yeah, like Russian division, I think. He was down there.
And so when bleary-eyed Josh Beckett comes in, everybody's like, well, shit, this will be fine. Well, it wasn't fine.
Yeah.
Came in the 5th, got the Cubs 1-2-3. Marlins tack on another run off of Wood and then Farnsworth because Dusty's
Wood was still in.
Yep.
See, even that. He was out of gas. I mean, I don't want to blame that for the walks. So the 2 walks in the 5th inning, Kerry was just as done as prior. Dusty beat them so hard to the end. But he had nobody. He had no provisional. Yeah. It seems like.
So Beckett had pitched a 1-2-3 5th. He comes back. He pitches a 1-2-3 6th. The Marlins add 2 runs off Farnsworth and then the great Dave Veers.
Yeah.
The gut punch that Seabass drives in a couple of runs. Now it's gone from 7-5 to 9-5. It's over.
Yeah. For the first time in front of our own fans too.
Beckett finally gives up a hit, and it's a home run to Troy O'Leary.
Yeah, see, I'm glad we can finish with Troy O'Leary because that motherfucker was a bust. He was one of the free agent signings going into the year, like a legit. He wasn't some guy that just made the team. He was expected to contribute. Didn't do jack all year, except help out in a game on a Friday where they had like 6 hours of rain delay in June. Finished at 10 o'clock at night, which was, I just remember because it was rare to see the lights on and the Cubs playing on a Friday night. And O'Leary had a big homer there. Otherwise, absolutely useless.
Yep.
And it's only fitting that he would step up to hit a homer in garbage time
to make it 96.
9-6.
Beckett comes back to pitch the 8th. 1, 2, 3. And then Oogie pitches the 9th. And who makes the final out of the season for the Cubs? But my favorite.
Your guy.
Gabor Bako. So Josh Beckett on 2 days rest pitched 4 innings, gave up 1 hit, and that was it. And that was the ball game.
That was the only non-out he made. He got 9. He recorded 9 outs on 2 days rest, and then
didn't walk a batter, only gave up the 1 hit, the homer with a 4-run lead that he could give a shit.
And just like that, very similar to 84 and very deflating. We would gather up our morale in the off season and realize there was a good team and they would on paper be better the next year, but
they did everything after doing everything wrong in games 6 and 7. In the offseason, they did everything right. They got Lease. They had a huge upgrade at first base.
Which, again,
I guess they didn't do everything right. They handed center field back to Corey.
But they didn't
Which was defensible because he was young. He was their top prospect, even though they completely fucked him up in the minors.
Do you remember? Right, they did. Do you remember the Lee? The Lee deal was actually criticized. Like I remember criticizing it, and I'm embarrassed to admit it. Like that's how much a lot of us were in love with prospects, even though Derek Lee had broken our heart. And Derek Lee was a little bit of a disappointing player, but had good potential. He obviously had his best years with the Cubs.
Yeah, I mean, I think the feeling was that he was.
We don't want to give up on Hee Seop yet.
Yeah, that would have been, I guess, the only concern. But the other part of it was that was a terrible park for him that he was playing in Florida. And getting him in Wrigley, all his offense would take off, and it's exactly what happened. Though it took a while. He was terrible in April. He was getting booed, and he was hitting in a million double plays. And then all of a sudden, he turned into Derek Lee.
Said that's where the Hee Seop Choi chants were carrying into April.
They signed Greggy, so they had made their starting pitching better.
Yep.
They
got Nomar at the deadline, but
they didn't really fix the bullpen.
No, they went into it with Joe, and then he faded. And I think that's when they got LaTroy. They signed LaTroy in the offseason
which was a good move because he was going to be a setup guy, which he'd always been good at.
Yeah, and I think they kind of did think that maybe he could be a closer because we all kind of thought there's an expiration date on Borowski. God bless. I just want to say, as we're wrapping it up, that God bless Joe Borowski because he really was one of the. I mean, there's a lot to love about that season, but what he did was really unexpected, and he just seemed like a regular dude. It was a blast, but we knew that it wasn't really meant to last for that long.
No.
So
he got hurt in 4. His arm fell off, basically.
That was it. He gave his life for the 2003 Cubs, like a few of those guys.
It took us a while. We finally forgave him for his disastrous emergency start.
Yes,
was that in 01 against the Giants?
Where
they gave up. He gave up 1 million runs.
Where
the home run to Barry Bonds that still hasn't landed.
Where the water was just rushing off his.
That was why we called him Sweaty Joe.
Like
he looked
Niagara
He looked
Falls.
like he was a kid running under a sprinkler for the end.
He totally redeemed himself, and he was the closer, and it was cool to see a guy named Borowski pitching for a Chicago team. It fit. And it was fun, and he was reliable. And like you said, even the one game he blew in this series, Game 3, he hung around to keep them in the game that they eventually won. So it pretty much he didn't do anything bad.
So Joe Borowski, first ballot Cub Hall of Famer.
I'll make the case. I'll make the case for him after I
get it. They can put his plaque right next to Orville Overall, and then you can put the Mike Montgomery one next to that too. That'd be good. 3 biggest outs in Cub history.
Well, we knew this would be a big one once we saw it land. I strapped myself in for a long night. I feel like it's like in Godfather length. This might have gone 3 hours.
I don't think nobody's going to complain about a 3-hour podcast about the 2003.
No, there'll be people that will tell us what we forgot. I mean, there's probably a lot.
I mean, think about how much we talked about, and yes, there was stuff that we either talked or just kind of to skip quickly over.
We had to give the proper treatment to the things that everyone remembers just to set the record straight. But, yeah, there was a lot of shit that happened. I'm glad I remembered Zambrano going yard over Wade Miller. That was a critical point.
And so it's a lot, your perspective changes. 5 years ago, the 2003 Cubs became much more likable than they
I'd
had
like
been.
to think so.
Than they had been before that. Oh, the 2014 will never be likable. Fuck those guys.
No. But you're right. I think we got there is that pain when you think of 2000. That's why I almost groaned when the wheel fell on it, because I'm like, we got to talk about it sometime. It was such a great season, but I know we have to go over the pain at the end. But you're absolutely right that the season this summer was so much fucking fun, and I think we brought that out because,
it was everybody's favorite season until it wasn't.
It was because I don't feel that way about 84 so much, because 84 maybe because time is the fact of it.
We were kids too.
As painful as the ending was, I remember how awesome the summer was. 2003, I still sort of immediately think about how, and I don't think that did happen in 84, that things just really turned dark.
Yeah. In 84, the Cubs were so starved for fans that I could go to the library, come into Rockford, and I could go to the library and check out books. And for every X amount of books, I would get they would get Cub tickets. And we went to 7 games a year, which was a lot for driving all the way in from, and they were 7-0 in the 7 games we went to.
No shit.
Yeah.
Wow. You went to as many games as I did. Good for you.
And then when we get to the 84 one, then we'll get to the fact that we were at the ticket window.
On your way out of town on vacation,
and we were just going to, we could squeeze in a Cub game. And
on
then
June 23rd.
all we could get was standing room only, and Dad knew Mom wasn't going to want to do that because she was with us because we were going on vacation. And so we were driving in a car listening to the Sandberg game, or we would have been standing somewhere in the park watching it.
Yes. You'll have to recap that when we do 84, a.k.a. the next 3-hour podcast.
Yeah. Now that's the other big one in this.
That'll be a long one.
All right.
So thanks for sticking around, listeners, if you did.
Oh, it's a podcast. They made it to the end.
Right. You can pause it and come back.
It may have taken them a week to get to it.
Yeah, I love this podcast. I drove to Colorado and back.
Many of us have herpes.